Honorable members, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you,
Waiting
Speaker.
for the Sergeant at Arms to come in.
The Speaker.
Thank you, honorable members. Let us observe the protocol and now Masitandazin. Let us pray. Almighty God, we have called us to govern this province. We ask your help to make decisions and laws that will be just and will promote the interest of our people. Almachtige God, ons bid dat u gedrende ons vergadering ons dienende wysheid sal gee en ons motiewe suiwer sal hou en dat u ons sal help om ons tekortkominge te oorkom en al ons besluite aan u op te dra. Sikelela Nkosi ilizwe lethu nabantu balo. Umisele Nkosi ukulunga kwiphondo lethu. Nkosi sikelela iAfrika. Gcina abantwana bayo. Khokhela Nkosi inkokheli zayo. Yinike uxolo Nkosi iAfrika. All this we beg in your most holy name. Amen. Honorable members, order. I trust that everybody has now been connected to participate in this meeting. This is a sitting of the Provincial Parliament in terms of Rule 1A of the standing rules, with all our members in remote attendance by electronic means. This is our fourth official sitting of the House remotely. The Western Cape Provincial Parliament remains fully operational, with members doing constituency work to assist the general public in whatever way possible, as well as our committees playing their oversight role in an effective, efficient, and transparent manner. Our sitting today will be conducted in terms of the standing rules and directives issued by me on the 17th of April, 2020. Honorable members, please allow me to highlight some of the important directives in this regard. The Secretary and his administration will ensure dedicated technical support at all times during the sitting. The quorum requirements for sittings of the House are as provided for in the Constitution and the standing rules. Unless there is an indication of unanimous concurrence, voting will take place by members present entitled to vote to cast their votes by clearly identifying themselves to the presiding officer, verbally expressing their votes. Members who are present have all the privileges and immunities imparted to them by law. Honorable members who are considered to be out of order by the presiding officer, microphones will be muted and they shall therefore be called to order. The attendance of the honorable members will be recorded by the Sergeant at Arms. In instances where these directives do not cover a particular eventuality, the standing rules must apply. Honorable members, in instances where the rules cannot be applied, the ruling by the presiding officer is final. Honorable members, all microphones have been muted. If that has not occurred, they will be muted immediately. You are therefore requested to only unmute your microphone when you need to raise a point of order. And for that, you will be recognized. Honorable members, you should then first state your name and surname in order for the presiding officer to recognize you, so that when you speak, you are the only person that speaks is yourself, not everybody else speaking at the same time. Please ensure that your mic is unmuted as you do so. And when you are done speaking, please mute your microphone again. Honorable members, the members of the media, as the Fourth Estate, have also been granted access to this MS Teams. And they, in this meeting, will have an observer status as guests of the WCPP. Members of the press may, however, not use the chat room, speak or activate their cameras while the sitting is in progress. For the purpose of this sitting, via Microsoft Teams, I am requesting that honorable members be sensitive to the language needs of other honorable members, since no interpretation services are available for this sitting. The Secretary and the ICT component are continuing to explore options for translations for future sittings of the House in this regard. As ruled by the presiding officer, which is myself, on the sitting of the 23rd of April 2020, also via this platform, no interjections shall be permitted during the debate. In this regard, I've also wished to draw the attention of the honorable members to Rule 40 of our standing rules. Honorable members, those are the directives which has been on record since we started off with the first session of the House. And this is therefore how we are going to proceed with the sitting today. I therefore wish to recognize the Chief Whip. I recognize the Chief Whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the motion printed on the order paper in my name.
Thank you, Honorable Chief Whip. Are there any objections to the motion? No objections? Agreed to. Is there an objection? Oh, no objections? Agreed to. Thank you, honorable members. Now we go to the questions in terms of Rule 202, as we see, as they appear in the order paper. The honorable minister's reply to the question is printed accordingly. Excuse me, honorable members, I'm just getting my question paper here. Where's my question paper? I recognize the minister.
Speaker,
if I can just come in, it's Honourable Minister Mayor.
Honourable Minister Mayor, I recognize you, sir.
Good afternoon, Honourable Speaker. Thank you for this opportunity. And thank you for the question from Honourable Member van der Westhuizen. The total value of South Africa's wine exports amounted to 9.57 billion rand in 2019. This is roughly equal to 184 million rand per week. The implication is that the direct loss in export value is 920 million rand. It's almost 10% of annual exports. Over the 5 weeks, wine could not be exported from South Africa. However, the immediate cost is not the biggest loss to the economy. Approximately 50% of the wine harvest is annually exported, and 95.9% of South African wines is in the Western Cape province. For this reason, it is not strange that wine is the third biggest export product of the Western Cape economy and contributes to 6.5% to the value of exports from the province. However, although important for the province and particularly for the rural economy, it is a very small player in the global field. The South African wine industry is also the 12th biggest exporter of wine and has got a market share of 1.8%. It follows that any interruption of supply by the local industry could be very easily be made good by wine from a range of other countries such as Australia, Argentina, Chile, and the United States of America. But obviously, we want to protect our local market here in South Africa and particularly here in the Western Cape. Due to the fact that competition for shelf space in retail outlets of export markets is very fierce, one of the key requirements to secure shelf space is the nature and the quality of service provided. As South African wine exporters were not able to honor their agreements, the risk is very high that local wine exporters will be branded as not being reliable. It is important to remember that shelf space or market share will be very difficult to recover once it is lost. It is calculated that a 5% decrease in market share will lead to a direct loss in export earnings of 478 million rand per year over the longer term, as well as the destruction of 15,000 jobs, a loss which South Africa's economy can ill afford at this stage. At this stage, it is too soon to provide a clear indication of the real size of the market share loss. Also, Honourable Speaker, the second part of the question, I did write 3 letters on wine-related matters to the National Minister on the following dates. On the 26th of March this year, requesting that critical work in wine cellars could be exempted from the lockdown in order to allow the harvest of wine grapes to be completed during the 2020 season. I wrote again to the National Minister on the 3rd of April, supporting the wine industry in its attempts to get exemption from the lockdown in order to allow the export of wine. Also, the third letter that I wrote was on the 17th of April, Speaker, requesting the assistance of the National Minister to allow the transport of wine to ports in order for wine to be exported. Other than the acknowledgement of receipt, no letters responding directly to the matters raised was received by my office. However, we believe that our submissions made a difference due to the fact that the regulations was amended as follows. Regulation 419 was published in the Government Gazette 43168 of 26th of March 2020, allowing the harvesting and storage activities essential to prevent the wastage of primary agricultural goods. Secondly, Regulation 453 was published in the Government Gazette 43211 of 7 April 2020, allowing the export and transport of wine. It is unfortunate, Honourable Speaker, that this regulation was subsequently rescinded by Regulation 456 as published by the Government Gazette number 43232 of 16 April. And lastly, Honourable Speaker, Regulation 480 was published in the Government Gazette 43258 of 29th of April, allowing the export of agricultural products, including wine, as well as the transportation of all agricultural products to ports, that's land, air and sea, and it was for this purpose to export. We believe that our submissions and also the submissions of my colleague, the Minister of Finance and Economic Opportunities, he also wrote to the national colleagues in the National Department of DTI together with Westgrow, and I'm confident that all of our letters had an impact on this. The wine industry, Honourable Deputy Speaker, is a very significant industry in the Western Cape. 98% of all the wine sellers here in South Africa are based in the Western Cape, and we need to protect this very special, important sector of the economy. And we are now taking the fight up to also see that we can have e-commerce and online wine sellers for the local market. But that's the next chapter, but we will certainly engage with the National Department in this regard. I thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Minister of Agriculture. May I request the follow-ups? I'm going to give the Honourable Van der Westhuizen, who asked the question, who put the question to the Minister, an opportunity, and then I'll give him the first right for a follow-up thereafter, and then I'll take other honourable members who wish to raise questions. I've recognized the certain hands. For instance, I see Honourable Maran, so I've noted you. Honourable Van der Westhuizen.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, through you to the Minister. Minister, you just informed this House that the National Minister did not respond to any of your letters. What signal did the Minister send out by her lack of response? And would it be correct to deduct that the job losses in the Western Cape agricultural sector, as well as the substantial loss in foreign currency caused by this silly ban on transport that had nothing to do with the spread of the virus, is of no importance to the national government?
Thank you, Honourable Van der Westhuizen. Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you for the follow-up question. Well, it is certain the Premier has indicated through our cabinet that we must work through the cooperative structures, engage with the National Command Centre, engage with the various MECs, and certainly work within the framework of cooperative governance. And I will continue to do so. Later this evening at 6 o'clock, we will have an agricultural min-mec discussion. And for us, it is important that we continue on behalf of the citizens of the Western Cape, on behalf of the economy of the Western Cape, that we do everything possible, despite all of these particular challenges and sometimes politics coming into the play. It is my job as the Minister of Agriculture to do my utmost best to see that we protect the sector of the economy. Here in agriculture is about 10% of the GDP of this province, 17% of the labor force, and I will certainly continue despite the complexities and difficulties that we have, given the great challenges and the volatility, the uncertainty, even the ambiguity that we experience in this situation. I will, together with my cabinet colleagues and the Premier leading this situation, do our utmost best to protect the economy despite the challenges. And even when the Premier started his term of office, he introduced the concept of resilience, meaning that whatever obstacles we receive, even letters not being answered, we will continue to push the boundaries for the benefit of the people, as we have been elected to serve the citizens of the Western Cape. And certainly I do this as well as all my colleagues in the cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I now recognize Honourable Maran. I've noted you, Honourable Marais. Honourable Maran, please proceed.
Speaker, thanks. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to everyone else in the city. Speaker, the Honourable Van der Westhuizen raised questions in a manner as if he knows how to raise the death, those people who have died from the death. Speaker, one question quickly to the Minister, because the question only refers to the regulations. Do the Minister thinks or believe that if there is indeed a case, a loss of foreign revenue, it's attributed to only the regulations, or also especially the European market, who have closed their ports of entry, like your airports, seaports, and so forth. Is it attributed only to the regulations if there is a loss, or is it a mixture of issues which include foreign countries who've closed their ports of entry? Thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Maran. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to Honourable Member Maran. I think firstly, we must understand that this loss on the revenue for the fiscus will be massive in South Africa. Certainly, the chop and change of the regulations had a huge impact. Firstly, wine was allowed to be exported, and then suddenly a regulation was then published to say you can no longer export wine. Now, during that period of time, we must understand that when the first regulations was allowed to export, people had already some of their assignment on the way to the harbor or already at the harbor. And so this has posed a particular risk, because now you sit with a stock on the harbor that cannot be exported due to the sudden change of the regulations. Well, I think Honourable Member Maran is absolutely correct. I think the massive loss of revenue was on both sides. Firstly, I think it was partly due to the irrational and illogical change of the regulation. It made absolutely no sense to prevent the export of wines, because the regulations that was published initially allowed for agricultural production. It allowed for agricultural exports, particularly our wines. And so the sudden change, there was no reason, no logic. And so what we have also seen globally as a result of COVID-19, it is absolutely correct. We have seen that certain of the major global ports have been closed, and we know those particular ports, particularly the Hamburg port, the port in Rotterdam, one of the biggest ports in the world, as well as the ports in Asia, was closed for imports on their side. But certainly we want to protect our market share, particularly our shelf space, because once people order wine and you are unable to deliver on your commitment, certainly people are not going to wait when South Africa, through our regulatory framework, get our act together. They look somewhere else, particularly Australia wine. They look even in California, also a wine producing region, as well as in South America. We know those particular markets, Burgundy in France, and many other regions in France. So it is important that we protect it. But in short, the loss of revenue will be massive, and it had both to do with our irrational regulations, as well as a result of COVID-19, the international community protected their borders and closed also some of their ports. So that is my answer, Honourable Speaker. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I recognize Honourable Murray.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I listened with great interest to the Minister's responses, and I couldn't help but have a slight giggle here. The Minister said, the regulations make no sense. We want to protect our market share. We know our markets. Minister, can you tell me, does your party support the federal solution so that you can have all those powers, so that these nonsensical regulations will not be applicable to the Western Cape, where you can decide for yourself what to export and what not to export? You can't have it both ways. You cannot agree to a unitary system, and then complain if you don't have federal powers. Now, how are we going to resolve this issue? Can you tell me what is your party's policy with regard to the devolution of powers to provinces so that they can decide for themselves what to export and what they can't export, whether it's level 5 or whether it's level 3? Do you want those powers, or are we forever going to hear moaning and groaning, but you stick to the present system? I would just like to hear your views on it.
Thank you, Honourable Murray. Honourable Minister.
Honourable Speaker, this is a very important question in the geopolitical landscape of South Africa. At the center of this question is, what does our constitution allow us to do? And what is my party's position in this particular regard? The constitution is very clear in terms of Schedule 4 of the constitution. And my party believes in constitutional democracy, expanding the powers of the constitution within the framework of the constitution. So Schedule 4 makes it absolutely clear where is the powers of concurrent powers between the national government and the provincial governments. What we have done over the last 10 years in this province is to expand the powers to the extent that it is within the concurrent powers. Therefore, we have on numerous concurrent powers have adopted this strategy to push the boundaries through legislative reform. And therefore, we have seen, for example, that even in the previous term, our Minister of Education has pushed for some education reform in the Western Cape through legislative reform. That is part of pushing the boundaries of legislative reform. So we have done that in particular regard to push the boundaries because Schedule 4 tells us the national government must develop the broader framework, and within that framework, the province must exercise their policy and legislative opportunities, and certainly we have done so. Schedule 5 of the Constitution is even more dramatic, Honourable Member Marais. As you know, it speaks directly to exclusive provincial legislative competence. And if you look at that space, Honourable Member Marais, you will see that my party, the Democratic Alliance, is the only party that has really, over the last 10 years, and even when you were a premier, have expanded the basis of Schedule 5 legislative reform by having all of those things, laws in the Western Cape that allows for that. Issues like, for example, the Western Cape Cultural Commission, the Western Cape Heritage Commission, the Western Cape Language Committee. There are many similar institutions, even Westgrow, all of these public entities with a good standing record. So, Honourable Member Marais, my party believes in constitutional democracy. We believe in expanding the powers of provinces, and we have done so over the last 10 years and even before that, and I think we've been very successfully. The second part of your question, Honourable Member Marais, is does my party believe in getting things done at the lowest level? Well, you would be pleased that my party has approached and adopted an approach that is called the whole issue of subsidiarity. Subsidiarity means let things happen at the lowest level where the local knowledge dictate and the local solutions to be found in that particular regard. And that's why we even went when there was an attempt to centralize the food distribution. We went to the Human Rights Commission, and the Human Rights Commission has ruled in our favor that they are not in favor of the centralization of food. We believe in the principle of subsidiarity, the churches, the organizations in the communities that can do a better job than have to centralize this at the national level. So conclude, Honourable Speaker, to the direct answer of Honourable Member Marais, we believe in constitutional democracy, expanding the powers of provinces, and we believe in the principle of subsidiarity. Let things happen at the lowest level where you can get a much better return on the service delivery than have to have it centralized. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. There is a last follow-up on this question, and that is Honourable Marais.
I thank the Minister for that very broad response. I know about subsidiarity, and subsidiarity merely means federalism. There's no other words, or a canton system or federal system. So we're on the same page, it seems. That is a big jump for the DA. And I must say, I'm not unhappy because that's Freedom Front's policy. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, honorable members. I see that there's still another member on this question. Unfortunately, we have exhausted the time in terms of the follow-ups. It can only be 4 follow-ups in terms of the standing rules. And for that, we move to the next question. Honorable Minister, Dr. Ivan Meyer, it's again your turn. I give you the platform.
Honourable Speaker, thank you for this opportunity to answer the second question from Honourable Member van der Westhuizen. Yes, there is no doubt that a number of workers have been affected by the infections. However, it is impossible to determine whether the spike is directly attributed to farming or related activities, as no scientific analysis has been done within the agriculture to determine the root cause of these spikes. What compounds the issue is the fact that the correctional facility in the area had also seen a spike in infections. It should further be noted that agriculture is deemed an essential service and therefore critical to ensure a sustained food supply for the country and its citizens. Similar to other essential services being affected by COVID-19 pandemic, the agricultural sector and or specific geographical district area within the agricultural domain cannot therefore be singled out as contributing factor for the spread of the virus, as no industry or social class is immune to this pandemic. Notwithstanding the aforementioned, all cases of COVID-19 that the department was made aware of were reported to both the Department of Employment and Labour as well as the Department of Health in order to ensure that all required protocols are adhered to. Honourable Speaker, the agricultural sector and the agro-processing sector is required to adhere to a number of regulations to ensure food safety and safe working conditions. In addition, regulations, these are also private standards that the sector must comply with. These include ethical standards that are implemented by, amongst others, the horticulture sector, comprising fruit and wine industries. And since the outbreak of COVID-19, the Sustainable Initiative of South Africa, also known as SISA, has developed also guidelines to assist companies in managing their processes in order to comply with the 5 golden rules of the pandemic. The ultimate aim is to prioritize the safety of employees so that production is not disrupted. The guide is further complemented by the prevention and management of COVID-19 in the workplace, which is a circular H70 dated of 6 May, which was recently released by the Department of Health, and it's an extensive list of how to prevent and manage COVID-19 in the workplace. We have also shared that particular protocol with the agricultural sector, and certainly it is well received in that particular sector. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I have not seen any other follow-up for now, but I recognize Honourable van der Westhuizen. I can see now there is a follow-up. Honourable van der Westhuizen, and then will be followed by Honourable Maran.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, through you to the Honourable Minister of Agriculture. As the Minister has stated, farming has fortunately and quite correctly been deemed as an essential service, and we are grateful to all in the agricultural sector for keeping us food secure in these days, despite the dangers of this epidemic. My question is, what has your department done to support and protect our agri-workers during this lockdown period from the death, as Honourable Maran has stated it?
Thank you, Honourable van der Westhuizen. I recognize the Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to Honourable Member van der Westhuizen. While the Department of Agriculture in the Western Cape has done a number of initiatives, the first one was to develop a frequently asked question to assist the agricultural sector during the lockdown period, because of these numerous guidelines, it was important for us to indicate to the sector how they need to deal with COVID-19. So we have published on the Western Cape Department of Agriculture website the frequently asked questions, and we regularly update it as new information becomes available. Secondly, Honourable Speaker, we've issued PPEs, or the masks, and the Western Cape Department of Agriculture has issued 100,000 face masks for our farmers and farm workers to protect our workers in the agricultural sector. In addition, Honourable Speaker, hand sanitizers. We've also received a donation of an alcohol-based sanitizer, and we have made it also available to the sector. And we want to put on record here our deep thanks and appreciation for Distel. And I want to thank the Premier for also alerting me to Distel, which I have subsequently, post our conversation, have visited. And we have also handed out some of these sanitizers in the region of Witzenberg specifically. In addition to that, Honourable Speaker, we have developed protocols. We have either developed it ourselves or assisted the sector with the development of health and safety protocols for the agricultural sector. And the most recent circular, 870 of dated 6 May, on the prevention and management of COVID-19 in the workplace from our Western Cape Department of Health is an outstanding circular, which we have also shared with the agricultural sector. And there's also a specific chapter dealing with fighting COVID-19 in the agricultural sector. In addition, Honourable Speaker, with the hygiene measures to follow during the workplace, we have also advised the industry on these particular protocols. And recently, we have also done some spot checks at the agricultural places to see that these regulations are being implemented and adhered to in the workplace. Lastly, Honourable Speaker, we have also, as you know, our extension officers. We have also asked them to also shift some of their work responsibilities to also assist the Department of Health, the Department of Labour, also to pay spot checks and visits to some of these farms and the rural communities in particular to make sure that we adhere the sector in terms of COVID-19 regulations. So this is what we have done. And we, in addition, we have seen that both AFASA as well as Agri-Western Cape have also, in addition, made extra efforts and issued some protocols to protect the workers and the agri industry in the Western Cape. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I now recognize Honourable Maran.
Speaker, thanks. Speaker, I just want to check with the Minister whether he's aware that, because the question is whether agri-workers are attributed to the number of cases and the spikes in the Witzenberg area, whether they are responsible. Whether the Minister is aware that on the 7th of April 2020, that 70 workers were sent home by CFG when the first worker showed symptoms. Also, Speaker, I just wanted to check whether the Minister is aware that on the 15th of April, after the first case in Witzenberg were registered at CFG on the 14th, on the 15th of April, when the Department of Health went in to screen, that 60 workers were sent home. Speaker, to isolate within their community, people like Nduli, for instance. And also, Speaker, the Minister raised the issue of the correctional services. And he raised it in response that it can't only be agriculture. When a number of people within correctional services have tested positive. Is he aware that the wife of one of those prison wardens is one of the prison wardens that was tested positive at CFG, which might be the link between the number of prison wardens that have tested positive at correctional services, Kowa Bokkeveld to be specific, and the worker, the female worker, which is also the wife of a prison warder that was tested positive at CFG site. Thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Maran. I recognize the Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I will try to answer the question very broadly. Firstly, in the context of Witzenberg, currently, as of yesterday, we had in Witzenberg a total of 211 positive cases. But we must put this also in context, that of those, 174 have subsequently recovered, which leave us with about 37 cases. Currently, because 8 have died, there are only currently in Witzenberg 29 cases that are currently active. The question is, from the agricultural sector, yes, I am fully aware of all of these incidences that Honourable Member Maran has spoken about, and the Department of Labour, as well as the Department of Health, have visited these institutions. And I think we must also remember the protocol is very clear. When an incident happens at an institution or at the workplace, when the Department of Health comes in, they normally advise what needs to be done at that specific sector. If one person has been found to have this tested positive, they normally make a recommendation based on their own assessment and criteria in the space of the workplace. And if they make a recommendation that the workplace people must go for tests, that is normally what happened. That does not mean that people are positive. They will be properly screened, and certainly that will be the case. I think it is important, if we want to make the causal link between what has happened at CFG and the link between the correctional services. I think this is something that I will rather leave to our medical practitioners to determine that medical link in that regard. It is plausible. I do not want to dismiss it. This could be plausible, but I think that is something for our medical and healthcare professionals to advise on us on that, based on evidence that they can trace. But I think we know that from the agricultural sector, there were 6 cases in farms in the Witzenberg area. 2 of those have recovered, and 3 currently is receiving treatment. Sadly, 1 has died, and it is suspected that there are not more than currently 20 cases in the agricultural sector in Witzenberg affected by this. But once a case is reported, it is important that everybody gets screened, and those who are in the high risk category, that they also go for testing and observe all the necessary health protocols and the 5 golden rules that we often speak about in terms of the COVID-19 regulations here in the Western Cape. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I've got a couple of members, so I'm going to take the next 2 hands. It's gonna be Honorable Nkondlo and followed by Honorable Barnes, and that will be the end of the speakers in this particular question. I recognize Honorable Nkondlo.
Thank you, Somlom. I just wanted to follow up, and I'm a bit answered with the response that Minister just gave, that okay. Since the question is asking about the correlation between the spike of infections in the agricultural sector to the production processes itself. And to me, he already indicated that at this point, there was no study or research or investigation actually done in this regard. Now, my question to him is, given that particular reality and the fact that in the absence of any scientific data at this point, it becomes reckless and irresponsible at this point to say, to dispute that those particular cases of infections in that area may actually have a causality to the production system, taking note that workspaces themselves, including workers that are working in the farms, are part and parcel of the ecosystem of food production. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mkondlo, I recognize the Honorable Minister.
Well, thank you, Honourable Speaker, to Honourable Member Kontla. I think the Premier is on record, this government is on record, that we believe in data-led, evidence-based practice, and certainly, we will certainly be following up on these particular matters. It will certainly take some time to make the causal links, and certainly when all the evidence and the research points in the various directions, we will be very glad and happy to come back to this chamber to report on those particular scientific reports. But for now, I think we have seen some major changes in the workplaces, protocols that are being adhered to. We are concerned about the agricultural sector because it's a significant sector in the economy. But one of the trends that we have certainly seen, and we have observed it as well during our recent visit with the Premier to Witzenberg area, is that the agricultural sector does a great job in terms of managing and preventing COVID-19 in the workplace. During this week, we also had a presentation by the Commissioner Klaas from the Correctional Services, who did also indicate the issue of the prison in terms of the Warm Bokkeveld prison, because as of yesterday, there were 22 cases. And obviously, these are wardens that also live in the community. And we are certainly from the Witzenberg COVID-19 response plan is monitoring the situation very closely. And certainly, we are concerned, firstly, about human life. We are concerned about the impact that it will have on agriculture sector. And we have seen also in 2018 that we had about 43 billion rand agricultural value production in this province, and certainly it will have an impact on agricultural value production, the COVID-19, and I'm happy once that research is done, we will come back to the House and produce that report more on a scientific basis. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I now recognize Honorable Barnes.
Thank you, Speaker. Mine is simple and straightforward. Witzenberg is a hotspot, Speaker, there's no doubt about it. And we also know that the agricultural sector plays a big role in that area. What I would want to know from the Minister is that, have you considered a special plan, noting that with what we have already there, that we are in crisis, that the department itself should start taking upfront responsibility, the same way we have done it with the export of wine, using the same method now to the human lives. I thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Barnes. That's the end of the follow-ups on these specific questions, Now, I must thank you, Honorable Minister, Dr. Ivan Meyer. That's the end of your questions for now, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
You're welcome, sir. You're welcome, Honorable
Thank
Minister.
you, Honorable Speaker. I'll be very brief. Thank you, Honorable Member Barnes. I think you're absolutely right. We must take a dedicated approach to save lives. That's the first prize of this government. And therefore, this Western Cape government has adopted a Witzenberg COVID-19 integrated response plan, not only a response of the health department, but the whole of government approach, the whole of society approach. And therefore, you are asking me, what is this plan? Let me briefly indicate to you, and also part of your question, you indicate that this department must take the lead. I'm happy to report back to this House that the Western Cape Cabinet has mandated me as the MEC for Agriculture in this province to lead the Western Cape Health Response Plan in Witzenberg. And this is what has subsequently happened. Firstly, the Western Cape Cabinet has approved the plan here at the end of April. The plan involves that the additional resources that must be allocated to Witzenberg and additional resources in terms of screening and testing has been done. Also, we are still looking to increase the further testing through a mobile testing facility. We still currently have some problems with the National Health Laboratory systems, but the Premier has written to the President in this regard. We are also doing public sanitizing of the roads in the Witzenberg area together with the Cape Winelands District Municipality. I have recently also visited Nduli in Ceres to observe and inspect the sanitizing of the public roads, because this is for us very important. As I've indicated, the plan also involved allocating 100,000 face masks. We have already allocated or distributed 35,000 face masks in the Witzenberg area alone. Also, in terms of this plan, we have isolation and quarantine sites in the Witzenberg area. We have also looked into Wolvekloof. We found it not to be a place to be conducive for the facilities that we have in mind. And certainly we are, through Transport and Public Works, have found also some facilities in Tilburg region. We are also working with the Department of Labor and our district health to implement inspections and enforcement in high-risk areas to ensure that the regulations are being implemented. Also, we have requested that we do some greater control over access routes in and out of Witzenberg. There are some 24 hours patrols in law enforcement. We have also requested through our law enforcement agencies, particularly South African Police Services and the South African National Defence Force. We are still waiting for those, have not yet been deployed in Witzenberg, but we continue to work on that. We have also, together with the Department of the Premier, Witzenberg Municipality and Cape Winelands, now developing a very comprehensive plan. Honourable Member Barnes will appreciate that we have also now asked one of the wardens that have been tested positive and who have now recovered from COVID-19, that person also take part in the communication campaign, and that person has been on the radio stations WRFM in Witzenberg, so that the message gets across, because our health department is currently looking into behavioral change in this particular regard. Also, we have developed some protocols. The protocol that we have also developed for Witzenberg in particular is the transportation of seasonal workers to other regions in the Western Cape, and also particularly to neighboring provinces. In addition, we've also implemented the transport protocols together with Minister Madikizela of Transport and Public Works, also working very closely with the Department of Labor. And I'm very thankful, Honourable Speaker, for Minister of Local Government and Environmental Affairs, Minister Bradell, because through him and the National Provincial Treasury have allocated 800,000 rand for immediate food relief and the food bank in Witzenberg, because nobody in that area must go hungry. And so we have also promoted the 5 golden rules throughout. The plan is much more extensive, but time does not allow me to go into greater detail. But I can say that I have been in touch today with Dr. Titus from the hospital in Ceres to check up. I'm on regular contact with the Mayor Klaasen to follow up on the implementation of this plan. And certainly I'm happy to report back at the later stage about further developments in the Witzenberg health response plan as part of the government integrated plan. This is not only the responsibility of the health department. We adopted the whole of governance approach, and I'm particularly happy that we are making progress. And if we look at the figures in Witzenberg that I have received also today, I think I'm very positive that today the figures is that we only have today 29 positive cases in Witzenberg. 174 has recovered, 8 unfortunately died, and I think we are making significant progress. And in our conversation with Dr. Keith Klute, he did indicate that the rate of increases of COVID-19 cases, he presented it to our cabinet in Witzenberg area, is now increasing at a slower rate, which means we are making an impact. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister of Agriculture. I thank the honourable members who dealt with the follow-ups on the question. I now move to question number 3, which is asked by Honourable Bosman to the Honourable Minister of Social Development. I now recognize Honourable Minister Fernandez. Honourable Minister Fernandez. Okay. All right. I think we're missing the minister. I will have to proceed for now to the next question. The next question is question number 4, which is asked by Honourable Philander to Honourable Minister of Health. I now recognize Honourable Minister Dr. Mbombo.
Thank you, Speaker. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Can you hear me? Okay. Thanks for the question, but noting that the question it refers to an article dated 3rd May, and now we are almost 3 weeks. So there might be some of the discrepancies. Thank you for the question. In reference to that, the response is about, with the lockdown, countrywide, actually all over the country, even the lockdown applicable even in other countries internationally. There will always be some medication that will be in short supply. So South Africa won't be exempted. As some of you might be aware that we are using the National Department of Health procurement, central procurement, as per the National Treasury, in most of the common medication. So currently, now, like I'm responding now, not on the 3rd. Currently, there are use items that are not available. Sometimes it becomes 100, sometimes 108 items, noting that we have got 1,000, more than 20,000 and whatever of the items, without boring you in terms of what are these kind of the medications that are still out. But what we do when we have got a stock shortage, we use an alternate supply. Because we do have the essential drug list that we are using the medications from. If they're out of stock, the clinicians can be able to have the alternatives. The medical depot places orders, and once deliveries are made, which may be part deliveries, we have to make a point that we rob Paul and pay Pauline in terms of the stock. For example, if, for example, there was a 6 packs or that needs to be provided to a person, but you'll find that there's a shortage of that medication, you might provide the person with maybe 2, and then you say, I owe you, and then come back again. But noting that because of the lockdown, most of the medication are delivered by the community health workers. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I recognize Honorable Bosman. And then
Honorable
I've got...
Speaker, Honorable Speaker, can you hear me?
Honorable Minister will talk, you will come in after the current question. I can hear you clearly now.
Thank you, because my mic was muted centrally. Thank you.
You're welcome, Honorable Minister. Let me acknowledge the following members for this question. I've got Honorable Bosman, and then I've got Honorable, I've got Honorable Philander, and then I've got Honorable Barnes, in that order. Honorable Philander.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Minister, thank you very much for the response. The article appeared, and yes, this is ongoing concern for many communities. Minister, can you perhaps please provide more insight into the procurement processes, and where does the province exactly fill in with the procurement processes of national, and how does the two complement each other in order to assure that there are adequate stock at our health facilities? Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Philander. I recognize the Minister.
It's quite complex, but what I can say that we have got a system, information system, technology that is in place, which from the Western Cape side, we initiated the provincial one even before that. The national introduced the national one. Let me qualify what I'm trying to highlight is that you could be able to know whether in Bito, in one clinic in Kransuk or wherever, there's a shortage of medication, because the clinic there, they rely on the medical manager or on the team of the Bito substructure. And then when they do not have, it means that they've got their own decentralized depot, for example, in Oudtshoorn, where they could be able to get the medication. But once now the medication is there, and then automatically from the Oudtshoorn side, which might be offering for the garden route, it triggers that within our centralized medical depot, which is here in the province. So you already know in advance if you're going to have any type of item that will be in terms of the shortage. And then when you know that the item actually there's a national shortage, for example, there was a time pre-COVID, there was a time where there was a shortage of the BCG, shortage of the contraceptive, shortage of some of the cancer drugs, the penicillin, and so forth. When now we knew already that because it is an international shortage, because of the raw material that is not available, and therefore already you'll have to now provide clinicians with a circular that instead of using item A, use item B when you're out of stock. I'm talking about those where we could be able to, it becomes an alternative. Or if there is no 3 months contraceptives injection, inform the people that they might not have that, therefore they must explore in terms of whether they could use other methods, whether it's oral and so forth. Of course, in terms of the National Treasury, using the different regulations according to the Treasury, there are those that are centralized, and then after 3 years, it's the National Health that in terms of sharing or advertise the tender. And in some instances, you'll find that when they advertise the tenders, they might have left out some of the medications that are being used in the provinces. And now when the service providers, pharmaceutical companies internationally, those ones who will have probably have changed, and maybe the ones now will be service providers, then you'll find that it becomes too late in terms of making that product. And then you might see a situation for almost 6 months or more, the provinces don't get that medication, whilst now the national tender, they have to review their system and add, or they look for the alternative. But in some instances in the province, when you can't wait anymore, when something like this has happened, we have to use from our own pocket, our own money, noting that we have already provided the money for the national procurement. We have to use our own money where there's an urgency, where we have to buy elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I now recognize Honorable Barnes. Honorable Barnes. And then I also have Honorable Maran. Let's go to Honorable Maran.
Speaker, thanks very much. Speaker, I just want to check with the Minister. She was saying that before COVID, there was a shortage of certain drugs. But it seems the response was it was not necessarily because of our government's own doing, but an international shortage. I just want to understand that correctly. Second, Speaker, is when the Minister has spoken about, and if there is some shortages, there's a percentage. It seems that the percentages of drugs not available is very low. And it seems that national government, including the provincial government, is actually doing very good within this period to make sure that chronic medications is there on a regular basis, and that there's, if there's a shortage, that shortage is actually very low. I just want to make sure in terms of the response of the Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Maran. I recognize the Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Member. It's one, the shortage, the pre-COVID, the contribution one, it's about where internationally the drug is no longer available because it could be because of the raw material. I'm just making an example of the BCG, the vaccine that we give it to the babies, because it was, although in South Africa, we'll find that we might have our own, some of the pharmaceutical kind of the labs, But when the raw material is from, let's say, India, and then India has run out of it, or that they are going to use it for their own, then it means that that shortage is beyond the control. Same applies when there was a shortage of penicillin. It was because of the raw material. So it's beyond the control. And therefore, the clinicians have to come up with what could be the alternative drug that could be used during that time. There was also, it has always been like that, also another contribution to the shortage. It's when they are national tender, which normally they do it every 3 years, which actually for us, we even made a recommendation for them that they mustn't do the tender like 6 months before the other one expires. They must do it earlier, and also they must indicate which drugs that will need to be available. Because remember, every now and again, some of the drugs end up being changed based on the new evidence. So what used to happen, it's always been happening, especially the November period until like about March, when people say ayiko out of stock. It's about that tender. Now, if there's a new one, and then you find that if they are saying that pharmaceuticals, these are the 20 drugs that we need for South Africa. And then out of those 20, they'll say we need how many based on Western Cape will make their requests. They'll say we need 5,000, Eastern Cape 3,000 or whatever, something like that. And then down the line, find that out of those 5 that say they requested, they only requested 3. And then the companies, pharmaceutical companies, only could be able to produce 3 in those large bulks. And then the 2 are not available. Therefore, it became their fault in the sense that they didn't add the number C and number D. As a result, now the provinces, basically for us, it means that the number C and number D, we have to find it elsewhere. Not necessarily that it is out of stock. But if they have used tender A, and that means that you have to out of our pocket to look for some of the others, and then we trigger the agent in terms of the agents in terms of the procurement and supply chain as approved by the provincial treasury. And then now with the COVID, the drugs that we are talking about that we're indicating, it's some of those that are related to because the production of them might be a company, for example, in China, or pharmaceutical company and whatever, where it was affected by the COVID. So they are unable not only to produce, but also it might be because of the shipment that will take longer because there's a lockdown that side, or they have paused the production of such. So I think the article, it was related specifically on the latter. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I now recognize Honorable Philander.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Through you, it is indeed very reassuring, Minister, that we have a system in the province that beforehand indicates what our stock limits are, whether there would be a shortage, and then that we have alternatives available. And then we also make use of own money to procure in the process. Speaker, that covers my question. In terms of remedial action, I just want to ask the Minister, is she aware of any deaths in the province that occurred due to medication shortages? Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Philander. I recognize the Honorable Minister.
Thank you for the question. I'm not aware of any death related to the shortage. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, I've got one last opportunity. I was looking for Honorable Barnes earlier, but I couldn't get hold of her. Now I'm going to proceed and give Honorable Marais the opportunity. Okay, Honorable Barnes.
I'm back, Speaker. Thank you, Speaker.
Okay.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question was to MEC was actually to find out how often we have to buy medication as the province, noting that we are aware of medication being borrowed from one region to another or from one auntie to another. How many times as the province do we find ourselves in a situation where we have to tap into our own pocket? Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Barnes. Honorable Minister.
I wouldn't know. Thanks, remember, I wouldn't know. It's difficult to quantify such. But the borrowing, my understanding is about getting medication where if, let's say, Garden Route still has got more, and then you take it to the Central Karoo. But remember, it's still part of the province. That is, it is allowed because it's still Department of Health. One can do such. Same apply, and then the issue of in terms of us buying from our own pocket. It is always like that when you have that 3 months gap from the national procurement and supply chain when they don't add some of the medications. But also noting that in some pharmaceutical companies, although they list the item will have been added on the list, when they realize, for example, if that item used to be used, let's say by South Africa, Tanzania, or Brazil, or where they can do it in bulk. I mean, in terms of the economy of scale, if now the other countries no longer use it, and then you find that down the line, in the middle of it, when they were supposed to produce, they found that actually not make much profit. And then you'll find that they will ended up not dumping us in that kind of a level where we have to find our means. But at least at that level, we'll find that the national will be able to know and then say, province, sort out yourself. But what is irritating is when every 3 months, when there's an exchange of the service providers in terms of the national treasure, tenders, and then we'll find that there's been a mistake, especially in the most drugs that normally they hit hard us on is the chronic medications on those people with cancer, those who have got bleeding tendencies, and then also some of them who have got other chronic medication like diabetes. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, and to Honorable Philander and all the honorable members who asked questions. I'm going to request now that Honorable Member Allen and Honorable Bosman, who asked the questions to the respective ministers, community safety and social development. Those questions, honorable members, will stand over, and it's question number 3 and 5, because we have now exhausted the time for questions in this particular sitting. Sorry, Honorable Fernandez, I know you had that glitch there. I hope you'll forgive us. And then now let us go to member statements. Honorable members, and the first member statement, I recognize the Democratic Alliance.
During the State of the Nation address of 2019, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced that over the next 6 years, every learner will receive a tablet starting by 2020. In his SONA 2020, the President announced the introduction of coding for grade R2-3 learners, which will be fully implemented by 2022. Not only was this too much of a simplistic view to have for the contested nature of public education in South Africa, it also lacked basic substance on how we would achieve these aims. Similar to Minister Mochega's announcement late Tuesday evening, after yet another 2-hour postponement, she merely reconfirmed the reopening date. Substance of a real plan is again missing. Yes, the rapid spread COVID-19 came with no warning, and every public department faces unprecedented challenges. But this must be no excuse for the ANC-led national government's poor prioritization and planning of education for the last 20 years. At this stage, there is still no clear picture on how learners in their foundational education stage will be returning to school. The National Department of Basic Education leaves parents and teachers with no updates on the curriculum and the effect it will have on already low literacy and numeracy levels. Speaker, this is completely unacceptable. I put it to this House, if the ANC was serious about the prioritization of education, we would have national at-home learning tools and an e-learning system that is beyond reproach. Instead, the Western Cape Department of Education has provided tools such as this and more for our learners and parents. The provincial department fills the gap where sadly national fails. Speaker, I make an urgent call for the ANC-led National Department of Basic Education to finally take a forward-thinking, evidence-based approach to support our children's future.
Thank you.
Continuously make regulations and
Thank
inconsistent policies and promises
Honourable
that fail
Porter.
the young people of this country. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Porter. Honourable members, thank you. I recognize the ANC.
Speaker, I'm here.
Yes, sir. Honourable Said.
Thank you very much. Honourable Speaker, as public representatives, it is crucial that what and how we communicate is carefully guided by the reality and sensitivity on the ground, and of course by what is in the best interests of the public. And our tone and approach must not manifest a lack of awareness of our material privilege and comfort due to our deployment, and a sense of arrogance and removal from reality of the majority of those we serve. Now is the time for the Honourable MEC for Education to provide leadership and to simply do her job to ensure the protection of our educators, staff and learners, and especially those who are in vulnerable circumstances and in overcrowded classrooms. Honourable Speaker, the cavalier approach which places human life at the altar of profits and petty party politics, as articulated by her party's national leadership and even some of the provincial bosses, such as MEC Madikizela, is not going to assist us. We are all in the same boat in uncharted waters, yet some have the responsibility to lead and to work with stakeholders to ensure maximum safety of our educators, staff and learners. And the ANC here in the province will play its role in that regard. Many of our educators, including learners, are terrified at the moment. Seemingly, many are forced to wait for departmental last-minute deliveries, and in fact, many schools opened without any mandatory equipment or supplies. In stark contrast, Speaker, many schools in leafy areas are buying the best protective gear and sanitizers. Some shop for screens to put on desks between learners, and many have cloth masks made in some of the school colors. But the poor in this province who need this assistance the most are sadly being left behind in most cases. Gagging our educators, especially principals, who are managing our schools and who are in the trenches will not help. Together we must acknowledge the fear, proceed with caution, and hopefully the MEC will rise to the occasion and lead. I thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Honourable members, before we proceed, I'm going to request that, because we're dealing with member statements, I know it's only 2 minutes. So if I say your time is up, I often do it just 5 seconds before your time. Just try and wrap up so that I don't have to keep saying it, because it also can be disruptive on the side of the speaker, of the honourable member speaking. I now recognize the DA.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaking in the midst of the global pandemic, we have been presented with an opportunity to adapt, change and rapidly move towards doing things differently. The lockdown has left us with a challenge in the way we traditionally interacted with our people. The Standing Committee on Local Government has been forced to change the way in how we carry out our constitutional obligations of public participation. In dealing with the need for public engagement in legislation, the Municipal Structures Amendment Bill presents us with a unique opportunity to test the various participation options. Our inability to meet with the various stakeholders due to the limitations placed on social interaction should not restrict us in engaging the public in our work. In order to comply with the national lockdown legislation and regulations and the Constitution, the committee needed to adapt to the changing environment. Consequently, public participation in this instance will be conducted through various online platforms and through an innovative have-a-say engagement, thus allowing individuals to have their say, voicing their opinions while staying at home. Speaker, we will not risk the lives of those in our province in order to come to a consensus on matters which must be conducted through a process of public participation. I call on the people in the province to embrace a new way of participation, both virtually and digitally, and make their voices heard. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable America. I now recognize the EFF. EFF, okay, you're not there. I now recognize the DA. The DA has no one to speak.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Yes, thank you, Honourable Mitchell.
My apologies. Honourable Speaker, we welcome the Western Cape Government's commitment to continuously adopting innovative ways to combat the spread of COVID-19. The whole of government approach continues to evolve. On the 18th of May 2020, the Minister of Transport and Public Works, Minister Madikizela, launched the Red Dot service. This is a first in South Africa, Speaker. This service will support essential service healthcare workers by safely transporting them between the workplace and home after the 7 p.m. public transport cutoff. This is another example of the Western Cape filling the gaps left by poorly constructed, ill-informed ANC national government lockdown regulations. Fortunately, the DA in the Western Cape has a forward-thinking, whole-of-society and caring approach. We will not see these vitally important employees left stranded. A further arm of the service commences from the 1st of June. This service will transport residents who have tested positive for COVID-19 or who are considered high risk after exposure. They will be taken to isolation and quarantine centers in safe, reliable conditions, aligned with the necessary protocols and measures. We must all recognize and appreciate the progressive measures this government continues to introduce to curb the spread of this virus. This is about preserving human life and not about our individual narrow self-serving interest. In light of this, the company utilized to deliver these life-saving services is called Umanyano. Umanyano meaning unity in isiXhosa. At a time like this, stakeholders, including Santaco and the taxi industry, can and have put all political differences aside to serve the people of the Western Cape. Honourable Speaker, this is clear evidence that the Western Cape government has the best interest of its residents at heart. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Mitchell. I now recognize Good. Honourable Heron.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, the World Health Organization says that contact tracing and quarantine are critical activities to reduce transmission and control the epidemic. And the US Center for Disease Control confirms that contact tracing is a core disease control measure employed by local and state health departments for decades and is a key strategy for preventing further spread of COVID-19. In South Africa, Professors Mardi and Mendelsohn, both members of the National Ministers Advisory Committee, confirmed that South Africa's ambitious community testing program relies on identifying infected persons, isolating them, tracing their contacts, and isolating or quarantining them. South Africa's planned response to the virus was widely welcomed, but as data is made public, it is clear that we have all been focusing way too much on the testing being undertaken across the provinces. The results of testing are giving us numbers and maybe a picture of how the virus is taking hold in our country. But the recommended health protocols to manage transmission requires some action from the public health authorities. That is to use the positive case data and immediately identify the positive cases' contacts, trace them and quarantine them. And this appears to be failing, and it appears to be failing across the country. Professors Mardi and Mendelsohn indicated that any single case will on average have 20 close contacts, probably higher in South Africa, that should be traced. By our calculations, the tracing rate in the Western Cape is about 1.3 contact per positive case, and that is self-evidently way too low. If we do not maintain a vigilant adherence to the full chain of pandemic management, we will fail to manage the rapid transmission of the disease. I ask the MEC for Health to use the opportunity per Rule 145.6 to explain to this Parliament what is happening with contact tracing. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Herwa. I now recognize the ACDP, Honorable Christians.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, the ACDP in the Western Cape supports the call by the provincial government and many others that the move to level 3 lockdown is a move in the right direction. If we remain at level 4, the mortality rate as a consequence of unemployment, starvation, will be more devastating than the virus itself. People in the most vulnerable communities are saying the likelihood of them dying of hunger is more likely than of the virus. Government cannot provide for everyone, and the unemployment rate is rapidly growing. This means more dependence on the state. This is not good for our shrinking economy. We all know the purpose of the lockdown was to slow the spread so that the Western Cape and the country can be ready for its peak. We know that lives are important, but so is the livelihood of so many others. As the ACDP, we're asking the ANC in the Western Cape not to obstruct this progression to level 3, but to support it, because together we can defeat this virus and revive this economy. I thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Christians. I now recognize the ANC.
Honorable Maran, Speaker.
Welcome,
Honorable Speaker, Honorable Speaker, whilst the corona pandemic hits the Western Cape hardest on the continent, too many people are forced to migrate away from this province. It came to light that Western Cape farmers stuffed symptomatic seasonal and other workers into taxis on their way to the Eastern Cape and other destinations. During the grace period, tens of workers crossed the border and was found to be positive with COVID-19 contamination. Many could not be found again after results came. These heartless farmers left many workers at their own risk, and many without means to get to their homes. Many were found hopeless and abandoned next to roads. Even during the lockdown and quarantine period, this happens. This is not an occurrence this year only. It too often happens that Eastern Cape and other migrant workers are used during high season in the Western Cape, only to be discarded like rubbish at the end of the harvest. The ANC says the provincial government and Agri-Western Cape must join hands with Labour and other interest groups to find solutions and better workable plans to deal with this annual occurrence of migrations. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Maran. I now recognize the DA.
Van der Westhuizen.
You may proceed, Honorable Van der Westhuizen.
I welcome the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development's 1.2 billion COVID-19 relief fund to support farmers. Unfortunately, this relief was limited to small-scale farmers. These farmers contribute only 1.6% of our food basket. Applications for this fund closed a month ago. The department envisaged that the evaluation process would be completed by the 8th of May, and that these small-scale farmers would have received their vouchers capped at 50,000 Rand per farmer for the purchase of much-needed input such as feed, fertilizers, seed, etc. by now. We learned yesterday that only a third of those that applied were successful. Individual applicants are still waiting to hear who qualified for the COVID-19 support. Unfortunately, the criteria to qualify for this support has not been aimed at important aspects, such as the potential to save agricultural jobs or to improve agricultural output where threatened by major factors such as the ongoing drought. When will this government wake up and realize that COVID-19 does not know race and affects everybody, and that government should support those that will benefit most from a hand up? We are facing a pandemic where food security could be at risk. While I welcome the support to marginalized groups, it is a global pandemic, not a demographically selected pandemic. I call on the National Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development to prioritize their communication regarding the allocations, to issue the vouchers soon, and after all, to target future support to those that would benefit most. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Van der Westhuizen. I now recognize FF Plus, Honorable Murray.
Thank you, Speaker. The Freedom Front Plus notes, as a matter of great concern, the dangerous situation existing at some Checker supermarkets. Pharmacies are operating within Checkered stores, and all customers use the same entrances and exits, serving sick patients with medicine. These patients, who may show mere flu symptoms and be assisted by pharmacists, may in fact be infected with COVID-19. Having sick individuals mixing with people doing their normal grocery shopping poses serious risks, and we should request the Premier to propose at the next PCC meeting that the regulations be amended to address the serious issue. We should further note that Checker Supermarket in Durbanville in particular has been closed 3 times since April because its staff were infected with COVID-19 viruses. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Murray. I now recognize Honorable Brancase Al-Jamar. Okay. I will then proceed to the last member statement. Honorable, that's the DA. The DA.
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, we've exhausted all 4 statements.
Okay. That's fine, Chief Whip. Thank you.
Sorry, Speaker. Was it exhausted all member statements?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I was going to respond. All right. Thanks.
No, they exhausted the speakers. Then now the opportunity in terms of the rules, Rule 145, subsection 6, that one of the members of the executive will respond. So if you want to take that opportunity, Honorable Minister, you may do so.
Thank you, Speaker. I wanted to respond to the issue on contact tracing, because it is crucial that we have to understand in terms of what does it entail, and what is the contribution from the Western Cape health side in regard to that. Indeed, it is true that contact tracing is crucial. Because it starts with the screening, the person, the testing, and then you isolate the positive, you quarantine those who have been in contact with a positive, and then you can only do that through the tracing. But one has to also consider that the virus mirrors itself in every context, in every population. Same applies in terms of its origin. Whilst in South Africa, across, it has been through imported cases, but you'll find that when it comes to the Western Cape, there have been quite more higher imported cases, plus also the associates of the imported cases. Of course, at the beginning, we have been trained behind when it comes to the contact tracing because of that. For example, you'll get that person who will have been a tourist, who will be coming here and probably planned to go elsewhere, whether to Kruger National Park and so forth. And when you trace the person, the people that will be close contact, because you need also to differentiate between the close contact and the casual contact. If you recall, at the time that the flights were still available, it was about when you have to look in terms of in the plane, the chair behind you and the two chairs rows behind you, the 2 rows in front of you, plus also the 2 persons that next to you. And then that is what you call the contacts in terms of that tourist who would have probably got into the Uber and then get into the hotel and then waiting for the quarantine. And therefore, that's one of the reasons that at the beginning, we trailered behind when it comes to that. However, Speaker, because you have to balance again, as I indicated, that it mirrors differently. And with the clusters that started also as well, it meant that now do you go and ask for who was sitting next to, which other tourist was next to this tourist who ended up as a close contact? Or when we have got these clusters in the shop, is it not better to, because most of these people, most of these people, they are coming from the poor community. So rather you go and target testing and be able to trace those people who are in the poor community so that you can make some interventions. That's why we have got the hotspot interventions now. So that's what I'm trying to highlight, Speaker. You can increase the contact tracing, but at the same time, you lose the positivity in terms of getting people who might need to be positive so that you can have the interventions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. That concludes member statements. And now we move to notices of motion. I recognize Honorable Bartman.
Thank you, Speaker. On behalf of the Democratic Alliance, I hereby give notice of motion that at its next sitting, this House debates the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and regulations on the Western Cape economy and efforts to save jobs. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Bartman. I now recognize Honorable Van Vogel.
Thank you, Speaker. I move with notice that the House, having noted recent developments in the province, which include over 10,000 COVID-19 cases and 183 deaths and 440 people in hospital, of which 128 are in ICU high care, call for an urgent debate into handling of COVID-19 outbreak by the Western Cape government. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Van Vogel. I now recognize Honorable Allen.
Hi, Speaker. I move with notice that this House debates the influx of cases of police brutality and heavy-handedness in the enforcement of the lockdown regulations and the impact it has on the residents of the Western Cape. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Allen. I recognize Honorable Klego. I recognize Honorable van der Westhuizen.
Honorable Speaker, on behalf of the Democratic Alliance, I move that this House debates at its next sitting the impact of COVID-19 on food security in the Western Cape and the regulations and support provided in this regard. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable van der Westhuizen. I recognize Honorable Mvimbi.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. On behalf of the ANC, the House notes with concern and therefore condemns with strongest possible contempt the reckless and unscientific utterances by the DA provincial leader, Bonginkosi Madikizela, who on Sunday called for the province to be moved down to level 3 because the number of infection in the Western Cape occurred under level 4 and 5 of the lockdown, and that is something that will visit all of us at some stage, and we can't stop living our lives because we are scared. And therefore, I move that the House debate the call for province to move down to level 3. Thank you, Speaker.
Honourable Speaker, on a point of order.
I recognize you, Honourable Mitchell. What's your point of order?
Honourable Speaker, I want you to rule, as per Rule 59, 1 and 2, that any member who wishes to bring any improper or in their view, unethical conduct on the part of another member to the attention of the House may only do so by way of a substantive motion comprising of a clearly formulated and properly substantiated allegation. I am of the view that Honourable Mvimbi did not do so when he raised the allegation against Honourable Madikizela, and I want you to please rule on that before the House adopts that motion.
On the point of order, Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Mitchell. I recognize you, Honourable Mvimbi, and then I'm going to make...
Honourable Speaker, Rule 59 Rule 59 is saying that 59.1, no member may impute improper motives on, reflect on the integrity or dignity of, or verbally abuse another member. A member who wishes to bring any improper or unethical conduct on the part of another member to the attention of the House may do so only by way of substantive motion.
What's your point?
Point of order. None of what has been raised by Honourable Mitchell is actually represented or reflected in section 59. He's actually misrepresenting that that clause.
All right. Thank you, Honourable.
That is your view.
Honourable Mitchell, I remember I gave you an opportunity to speak, and I don't want us to have a debate across the floor at this point. Let me acknowledge the Chief Whip of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's important that as and when we interpret the rules, we interpret them in an obvious and sound manner for everyone to understand. Now, what Member Mitchell is doing is actually trying to put the rules as a way of hindering other people from operating and exercise their constitutional right in the House. And therefore, Chair, I do not see any reflection of what Member Mvimbi said to what is said in Rule 59. I thank you.
Honourable Speaker, if I may.
Thank you, Honourable Leke, Honourable Chief Whip Leke. I'm going to request that at this point, I'll give the last opportunity, Honourable Mitchell, and then I will make a ruling for now.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I don't want to belabor the point. The reality is nobody's taking the right to speak away from Honourable Mvimbi. All I'm saying is that in the event that Honourable Mvimbi wants to table a motion of improper conduct and bring it to the attention of the House, you must please follow the rules. And by that, I mean a substantive motion needs to be tabled and not a motion with notice. I thank you.
Thank you, honourable members. I now have to provide some guidance, so now we should proceed. I'm going to look at the contents of the motion by Honourable Mvimbi, and in the next sitting, I'm going to make a ruling on that.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you, honourable members. I hope we fine now. Honourable Murray. I recognize Honourable Murray for the motion.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move with notice on behalf of the Freedom Front Plus that this House debate the efficacy and sustainability of the Cape Agency for Sustainable Integrated Development in Rural Areas, CASIDRA, with special emphasis on job creation, food security, and empowerment of emerging farmers. Further, that consideration be given to requesting a thorough investigation by the Western Cape Service Commission, Public Service Commission, in this regard, and to table its report to this House within 6 months. I so move, sir, because this agency has done nothing to empower Black and coloured emerging farmers since 2007.
Thank you, Honorable Murray. I now recognize Honorable Nkondlo.
Thank you, Speaker. I move on behalf of the African National Congress that the House notes with concern that 7 staff members of Food Town Hyper in Khayelitsha with defied orders of management and went to get tested for COVID-19 after a colleague of theirs was infected have been fired by management. Notes further that management had threatened employees not to get tested last week and refused to close down as per the protocol. Calls for an urgent investigation into the conduct of this company. I so move.
Honorable Nkondlo, that is a motion without notice. And you were dealing with the motion, notices of motion. So that will not qualify for this exercise, right? For this particular process right now. We'll deal with it later on. But your name was here on the motion, on the notices of motion. Perhaps you misplaced that one. I'm going to proceed for now to Honorable Venfochen. All right, let's proceed to Honorable Lecker. Chief Whip of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Am I audible?
Yes, Chief Whip, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby move that the House debates the many successes by the SAPS in its battle with abalone and marron poaching in the Western Cape. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Chief Whip. I now recognize the Honorable Barnes. Honorable Barnes.
Thank you, Speaker.
Honorable members, before we proceed, Honorable
Speaker.
Barnes. Yes, Honorable Barnes, I recognize you, but before you proceed, I would like to state the following, that Honorable members, this was a motion for Honorable Bagu Force, but it was brought to the attention of the Speaker that she is unavailable to proceed, and therefore Honorable Barnes will take the motion. You may proceed, Honorable Barnes.
Speaker, I move with notice that the House discusses the failure by the Western Cape Department of Social Development to maintain safe social distances between poor visitors and in and around its offices. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Barnes. Honorable members, that concludes the notices of motion. We now move to motions without notice. I recognize Honorable Philander.
Thank you, Speaker. I move without notice that the House notes with sadness the latest total of 6 healthcare workers that sadly succumbed to COVID-19 in the Western Cape. Their service to the people of the Western Cape have certainly not gone unseen. Also, Speaker, please let us ensure that we do everything possible to ensure their safety as well. My heartfelt condolences and prayers to their families, friends and colleagues. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Philander. I now recognize Honorable Nkondlo.
Thank you, Speaker. I move without notice that the House notes and makes a call to the provincial government through the Economic Recovery Workstream to be active in finding employers in the Western Cape who have claimed UIF COVID-19 benefits but still not paid it to the deserving beneficiaries. Further calls on the provincial government working with municipalities to heighten awareness to employees on how to apply directly to this fund using all available media awareness, including local radio and newspaper, especially in the non-metro, and use the satellite offices of the Department of Labor so that this report can actually be made weekly to the ad hoc committee. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Nkondlo. Honorable members, I recognize Honorable Philander.
Thank you, Speaker. I move without notice that this House notes with sadness the passing of Reverend Dr. and Professor Mary Ann Plaatjes van Huffel, daughter of Wellington. Professor Plaatjes was 'n baanbreker, die eerste vroue dominee van die Nederduits Gereformeerde Kerk in Suid-Afrika, die eerste vroue aktuaris van die VGK Suid-Afrika Kaapland en die eerste moderator van die VGK SA se algemene synode. In 2013 was sy verkies as een van die adjunkpresidente van die Wêreldraad vir Kerke en as Afrika-president vir die Wêreldraad van Kerke. Sy was 'n merkwaardige mens met besonderse leiereienskappe en sal onthou word vir haar belangrike bydraes wat sy plaaslik as ook internasionaal gemaak het. 'n Vrou van standpunt wat die grense van stereotypering vir alle generasies en vir generasies na ons verskuif het. Ons dra ons medelee oor aan Dominee David van Huffel, haar susters en uitgebreide familie, as ook haar geliefde kerkgemeenskap. Dankie, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Philander. Honorable Tlego is not in the House. I then recognize Honorable Allen.
Mr. Speaker,
Thank you.
Okay. Honorable Allen, please take your seat. What's your point of order, Honorable the Chief Whip?
Mr. Speaker, I'm just checking if the House agrees to the motion.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chief Whip. Honorable members, the motion by Honorable Philander. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections, agreed to. Thank you, Chief Whip, for bringing that to my attention. I now recognize Honorable Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move without notice that this House wish the Western Cape Muslim community a blessed Eid, which is due in the coming days. We know that the month of Ramadan is a time for reflection, prayer, giving, and sacrifice. And that this House wish all Muslims within the Western Cape a happy and peaceful day. Thank you. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Allen. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? Thank you very much. Let's proceed. The motion is carried. I now recognize Honorable Said. Honorable Said. All right, I will proceed to Honorable.
Speaker, sorry, Speaker, I was on mute, Speaker. I didn't realize I was on mute.
That's fine. That's fine, Honorable.
Thank you.
May proceed.
Thank you, Speaker. I move without notice that the House notes that Ms. Nolotando Nonqinisa, a youth activist and a member of the Western Cape Provincial Executive Committee of the ANC Youth League, has been hospitalized after she contracted COVID-19. Notes further that Nolotando was moved away from the quarantine site in Dennerbos to the Ceres Hospital after her condition became serious, and wishes her a speedy and full recovery. I thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Said. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. No objections. Agreed to. I recognize the Chief Whip, Honorable Wenger.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. As Christians celebrate Ascension Thursday today, may this occasion be celebrated with peace and love in our hearts. I so move.
Thank you, Honourable Chief Whip. Honourable members, are there no objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections, agreed to. I now recognize Honorable Van Focha.
Speaker, I move without notice that House send condolences to the family, friends, and colleagues of Tygerberg professional nurse Anka Kepsky, who on Wednesday died of COVID-19. Sister Kepsky is the 5th health worker in the Western Cape who became a victim of the pandemic and was the assistant manager of the trauma unit at Tygerberg Hospital in Bellville. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Van Vochen. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honorable members, I recognize Honorable Bosman.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I move that this House condemn the National Department of Social Development's attempt to centralize the distribution of cooked food and control nutritional programs being run in communities across the country. That this House further notes that the South African Human Rights Commission has labeled this a violation of human rights after Democratic Alliance lodged a complaint against the National Department. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Bosman. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice?
Yes.
Objection. Objection, Speaker.
All right. Thank you, honorable members. The objection has been noted and the motion will be printed in the order paper. Honorable Lecker, the Chief Whip of the Opposition. We're gonna wait. Number 1, 2, 3. Now we'll proceed. Honorable
Speaker.
Yes. So you were listening
Speaker,
to my
I wanted
country.
to check if I'm audible enough.
You are audible, Chief Whip. You are.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the ANC, I move that the House notes that an 82-year-old Mbekweni resident tested positive for the coronavirus and was sent back home to self-quarantine, and calls on the Provincial Health Department to investigate this matter and urgently reports about it to the House, to the legislature. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Lecker. I would like to establish from the members whether there are any objections to the motion being moved without notice. No objections.
No
Motion
objection.
Agreed. Motion agreed to. I recognize Honorable Maseko.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I move that this House applaud the work being done by the Western Cape Department of Human Settlements to continue social housing projects during lockdown. This is part of the Western Cape government effort to provide sustainable human settlements to those who need it the most. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Maseko. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. I now recognize Honorable Van Vochen.
Speaker, I move without notice that the House notes ANC Senior Legislature Member Honorable Gladys Baku-Baku-Vos has fully recovered from COVID-19 and is back at work serving her community. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Van Vochen.
Mandla. Mandla.
Mandla.
She's not at
Honorable
now.
members, thank you.
That is actually unparliamentary.
Thank you, honorable members. That is not how we behave in the House. May I request the House to note the motion and thank the fact that Honorable Van Vochen is back and well, and we welcome her back on duty. Are there any objections to the motion?
Point of order.
Correction.
Point of order.
Speaker.
Point of order.
Speaker.
Point of order. Point of order, Speaker.
What's the point of order?
The point of order, Speaker, is that you actually referred, I think incorrectly, to Honorable Van Vochen being back in the House, whereas I think the reference was to Honorable Baku-Baku.
Oh, did I? I didn't notice that. Thanks, Honorable, the Leader of the Opposition.
It's a pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure, Speaker.
Thank you. I talked
That's
to
an
Honorable
extra vote
Babu.
for him. It's an extra vote for him.
Thank you. I talk to Honorable Babu Force all the time. I'm glad that she's back, and we thank God for her. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honorable Philander.
Baie dankie, agbare Speaker. I move without notice to extend my sincere thanks and appreciation to all community organizations and individuals in the Drakensberg municipal area who are working day and night to provide social relief and assistance to the vulnerable society in Drakensberg. I further extend my sincere thanks and appreciation to all donors and volunteers that are opening their hearts to social relief initiatives on a daily basis. Your tireless efforts during these challenging times are commendable. Let's continue to be each other's keepers. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Philander. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Motion agreed to. Honorable members, I now recognize Honorable Barnes.
Speaker, I move without notice that the House notes the Central Karoo District Municipality flaunts Honorable MEC Anton Bradel's instruction to host virtual video meetings, that the DA Mayor Annalie Rabi calls regular contact meetings and rakes in subsistence and travel allowance by almost daily commuting between Prince Albert and Beaufort West, and calls on the MEC to investigate and urgently report to the legislature on this matter. I so move, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Barnes. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice?
No objection.
Object.
No objection.
I object.
Object.
All right. Objection has been noted. The motion will be placed on the order paper. Thank you, honorable members. The next motion is by Honorable Mackenzie.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I move a motion without notice that this House recognizes the work being done by Al Manana, a volunteer group based in Lentegeur, Mitchells Plain, that have taken up the task of feeding hundreds of residents during this difficult time. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Mackenzie. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice?
No objection, Speaker.
No objections. Agreed to. I now recognize Honorable Van Vogel.
Speaker, I move without notice that the House notes with sadness that Overberg, resident of 62 years last week, became the first casualty of COVID-19 in that region, and that this legislature sends its condolences to all family and friends of those that died of corona-related problems. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Van Vogel. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objection.
No objection.
Agreed to. I recognize Honorable Allen.
Mr. Speaker, I move without notice that this House commend the Hawks on a successful drug bust on the N1 in Cape Town, amounting to 36 kgs of cocaine. That this House further note that drugs and gangsterism are stealing our young people's future. That this House commit to continue and ramp up its efforts to build society's resilience to crime in families, in the school environment, amongst youth at risk as a result of the harms caused by substance abuse. And that this House call on all law enforcement agencies, together with the entire criminal justice system, to play its role towards ensuring that drug premises are closed and criminals are brought to book. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Allen. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being read without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honorable Barnes.
Speaker, I move without notice that the House bids a Central Karoo resident a speedy recovery who on Monday became the first recorded positive patient in the region. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Barnes. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? No objections. Agreed to. I recognize Honorable Allen.
Mr. Speaker, I move without notice that this House notes the commemoration of International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia on the 17th of May 2020. And I move that this House supports events raise to raise awareness of the violation of LGBT rights in the Western Cape. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Allen. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion?
I don't know what all those phobias mean. Can you explain what all those phobias? Otherwise, I'm going to object.
We don't explain that motion.
A quick Google search will help the member.
We don't explain. I think I would like to hear from Honorable Murray whether is that an objection. No objection.
Yes, I object.
You object? All right. Honorable members, the objection will be recorded in the order paper. The motion will be recorded in the order paper. The objection has to be noted. I now recognize Honorable Leka, the Chief Whip of the Opposition.
Thank you, Speaker. I move that the House commiserates with the family, friends, and compatriots of Professor Mary N. Plaatjes van Joffel, 61-year-old of the Stellenbosch University Theological Faculty, who died on Tuesday after an operation, and also notes she was the first Black ordained preacher of the Dutch Reformed Missionary Church. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Leka. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being read without notice? No objections. Agreed to. Honorable Leke, I recognize you. All right.
Honorable, is it Honorable Lekker? Honorable Lekker or Van Vogel, Speaker?
I've got on the list here Honorable Leke in terms of the list of submitted motions.
Okay.
But they follow each other, so I bet there must have been an error. Now we proceed to Honorable Van Vogel.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I move without notice that the House note the overload of hospitals and the health staff workload due to serious COVID-19 contamination, and that Honorable MEC Noma Friends Bombo reports to this legislature on the situation and readiness ahead of the possible upsurge. I thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Van Vogel. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice?
Object.
Chair.
Objection.
I object that the motion being moved without notice.
All right. Thank you, honorable members.
Honorable Speaker.
Members, order, honorable members. We're dealing with
Honorable
motions
Speaker.
without notice. Who is
Honorable
that?
Speaker, it's Honorable
Chief
Lekker.
Whip? Yes, the Chief
I
Whip
was
of the-
in the middle of reading my motion, and then there was this conversation between yourself and Member Van Vogel.
All right, we'll finish with this motion now, and then I'll give you the opportunity, Honorable Chief Whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being read without notice? I've recognized the objections, and the motion will now be recorded in the order paper. The objections have been noted. I now recognize Honorable Leka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House notes the attack and robbery last week on the ANC ward councillor in Old Cross Road, Nokutula Police and her 13-year-old son, and bid them a speedy recovery of the wounds they sustained. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Leke. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being read without notice? No objections. Agreed to. I now recognize Honorable Nkondlo.
Thank you, Speaker. I move without notice that the House notes and calls for an urgent establishment of our CWP's branch COVID-19 committee that will investigate the socio-economic impact of COVID-19 in the province as it relates to women and children, including poverty, hunger, job losses, and the general labor conditions and care support in both public and private sector workspaces, as well as to include GBV during this period, and further calls for investigation into the impact of this on women-owned enterprises and how their basic human and labor rights have been undermined during this time. For this report to be tabled and debated during the Women's Parliament in 2020, I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Nkondlo. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being read without notice? No objections. Motion agreed to. Honorable members, the next speaker is Honorable Nkondlo. I recognize you, Honorable Nkondlo.
Thank you, Speaker. I move without notice that the House notes the poor services to informal traders in the townships and the absence of an inclusive database of all informal traders in the city of Cape Town, despite there being a highest concentration of them in the province. Notes further that this has led to exclusion and difficulties for informal traders to trade with businesses of essential services and goods during the lockdown, as cities supported by this provincial government flatly refuse to permit those traders, as they choose to only provide to those that they term suitably vetted, and condemns this practice as it further entrenches the inequality that has been existing in the province and further perpetuates by such abuse and misuse of regulations that keep informal traders out of the economy, and calls for an enhanced effort similar to the city and needed investment in urban markets like in Seapoint, Woodstock, and CBD. I so move.
Thank you, Honorable Nkondlo. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice?
Objection.
Objection have been recorded. The motion will now be. Thank you, honorable members. The objection has been recorded. The motion will be recorded in the order paper. May I now request Honorable Nkondlo? Before Honorable Nkondlo, I see Honorable the Chief Whip of the Opposition. You've got your hand up.
No, Honorable Speaker, it was during the time where I was busy with the motion.
All right, thank you for that. Honorable Nkondlo.
Thank you, Speaker. That ends my motions that I have. As per, I'm not sure of a fourth one.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Nkondlo. No, you had 3 in a row, all written in your name. Yeah.
Yes, I've read all of them.
Maybe the computer fell in love with you. Let us now proceed to Honorable Sayed. Honorable the Chief Whip.
My apologies. Have you concluded with the motions of notice?
The next one is the last one.
Okay, I'll raise my point then. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Whip. I recognize Honorable Sayed.
Honorable Speaker, I move without notice that the House notes the Ward Councillor of Hout Bay, Roberta Quintas, has downplayed Hout Bay as a COVID-19 hotspot as identified by the Western Cape Provincial Government, and has actually undermined the Premier and the provincial government by releasing a statement stating that the provincial government provided the wrong statistics for Hout Bay. I so move, Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Said. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice?
Yes, we'll move without notice because we haven't seen the effects yet, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you.
So they're not watching SABC TV.
No, we don't watch propaganda.
Thank you, honorable members. The objection has been noted.
We'll speak to the members in council.
Order, Honorable Said.
Sorry, Speaker.
Thank you. Apologies accepted. I've got a nice, comfortable space to accept apologies. Thank you very much. I would like to put to the members that the motion has been, the objection has been noted to the motion, and that the motion will be recorded on the order paper. I hear the Chief Whip wants to say something, but what I would like to do now, at this stage, I would like to request that you please relieve me. It's been a wonderful day up to now, and the Deputy Speaker will take charge. I can see her face there. She's ready to relieve me. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Honorable members, thank you, Deputy Speaker. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Chief Whip. Thank you. I just thought that before the Speaker leaves, there are no decisions of the House on the first two motions without notice. That's correct.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Chief Whip. I'm going there now. I remember, Chief Whip, you drew my attention to the motions when we started with the third motion, and we inadvertently omitted to go back to the first two. Thank you for bringing my attention to that. Honorable members, I would like to put the question. Are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice? And that was the first motion. No objections, agreed to. And then the second question by Honorable Mkondlo. Honorable members, are there any objections to the motion being moved without notice?
Objection.
No objections.
Objection.
Are there objections? Who's objecting?
Deirdre Bartman objecting.
Oh, objection. The objection, thank you, honorable members. The objection is noted and the motion will be recorded in the order paper. Thank you very much, honorable members. That concludes the motions. Over to you, Deputy Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. We will now deal with the subject for discussion in the name of Honorary Brett Heron from the Good Party as printed on the order paper. I recognize the Honorary Heron. Honourable Heron, my apologies.
I don't know what honorary is. Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, the manner in which societies organize space has a key bearing on social and economic dynamics. In South Africa, race and space remain indelibly linked. More than 26 years of democracy have miserably failed to unravel colonial and apartheid town planning. Nowhere is this more apparent than in Cape Town, where conservatives and the DA have found ways and means to block every single affordable housing project proposed for development in areas that their National Party fathers designated for whites only. The DA's record mirrors that of the ANC when it held the reins in the city, a big fat zero. On the Cape Flats to this day, many families don't speak about where they live, they speak about where they come from. And where they come from is not Lavender Hill, Grassy Park or Nyanga. It is Constantia, Newlands, Sea Point, District 6 and Simonstown. Spatial injustice is the axle on which the wheels of inequality and the cycle of poverty turn. Families with the least household income must travel furthest to get to work, to the stadium, shopping mall, hospital or school. By the time you've paid for transport, what do you have left? They return to impoverished neighbours and communities where social issues like gangs, drugs and crime take root. Without jobs, as many are, people are trapped in their immediate environments. There's no way out. Between 2016 and 2018, when I was responsible for housing in the city of Cape Town, our team doubled the delivery of affordable housing. Between 2016 and 2018, we initiated multiple projects to deliver affordable homes in good parts of the city. Thousands of inner city homes would have been under construction now, but the reality is not a single home is being built. The DA stopped these projects. They also stopped people traveling out of apartheid townships. For 5 years, my city provided safe, affordable transport to residents of Khayelitsha and Mitchell's Plain. 8 months after I resigned from the DA, they stopped the service. That was almost a year ago. The province has fared no better. The Premier shows off Forest Village as his government's commitment to spatial justice. Forest Village is at the very outermost edge of the metro, a location for the poor in a very poor location, far from work, far from education, and far from whites. I understand it may be scary for conservative politicians to consider coloured and black people living in their neighbourhoods, just as it is difficult for them to countenance leaders such as Delil, Mazibuko, Mashaba, or Maimani. But to continue developing dense settlements for those with few real rights, out of sight and out of mind, is not a viable alternative. DA leaders must come clean with their constituents and supporters on the Cape Flats, among other areas, and tell them why they don't want them in their suburbs. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. I recognise the Honourable Minister, Madikizela.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. It is indeed a fact that the history of this injustice is long and undeniable, and in the last 100 years plus was codified into a number of abhorrent pieces of legislation. These statutes all had their own specific goals, but the overall intention was clear: depriving some people of their right to ownership of fixed property and to access to the infrastructure needed to deliver a decent standard of living. This is indeed, Deputy Speaker, a very long history, started as far back before 1913, but 1913 produced the Native Land Act, the first piece of segregation legislation passed by the Union Parliament. And in 1934, we saw the Slums Act designed to displace Black people from urban areas. And in 1950, the Group Areas Act was produced, which led to the various forced removals, which left still existing scars on our society and which shaped much of the residential patterns of this legacy. The list is depressing and seemingly endless, Speaker. And this is South African phenomenon, and that is why you still have Mamelodi and Pretoria, you still have Umlazi and Durban, you still have Khayelitsha and Cape Town. And therefore, Member Heron must not give the impression that this is something unique only in the Western Cape, because that would be disingenuous. And so, Deputy Speaker, infrastructure was used as a strategic instrument to segregate people spatially based on race. This just provision of water, accommodation, electricity, sanitation, education, health, and so on, all requires infrastructure. And this was denied or provided only in the most basic form. Given the limited time available for this discussion, Deputy Speaker, it is not my intention to attempt to address all the steps taken or not taken to address spatial inequality by the various spheres of government involved. I will instead limit myself to a few aspects of my present portfolio. I have no doubt that my colleagues, like Minister Simmers, will also cover pertinent aspects of the work already done and being done in his human settlements portfolio. And it is very disheartening, Deputy Speaker, to hear smokes and mirrors from Member Heron, and yet he's got nothing to show for his track record when he was the MACO member in the city of Cape Town, besides to tell us how bad his former party was and all the attempts that he made to do what he failed to do. And therefore, I was hoping that when he raised this debate, he will at least give us
some indication of his track record where he succeeded, in dealing with the challenge that we are facing. Deputy Speaker, the work undertaken by my department is ensuring that the properly planned and financed provision of accommodation, which breaks down the entrenched patterns of spatial inequality, is best illustrated by the following developments. And also, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is very important for us, when we are having this debate, to really be honest about the practical steps that we need to take, because I get a sense that some of us have this notion that to address the spatial injustice, you need to take everyone to town. The reality of the matter is that you have areas like your Kailicha, your Mitchell's Plain that you cannot wish away. And therefore, it is very important to also note the interventions that have been made in those specific areas, even though they are not enough, to make sure that you create an environment in areas like those so that people can live a decent life. In partnership with the city and the private sector, the department developed and implemented a better living model, exemplar on well-located urban state land that will support positive social, economic, and spatial integration with a view to being able to replicate this on the other sites in future. The 22-hectare former Conradi Hospital site was identified as a suitable location for the pilot of this exemplar for better living model. This development will create affordable integrated housing opportunities close to Cape Town CBD and transform the site into an integrated place where people can live, work, play, and learn. The primary objective is to create an affordable, residentially led mixed income and mixed-use development that optimizes urban land use and incorporates a range of grant-funded housing. The total of 1,764 grant-funded units will be made up of 1,235 social housing units and 529 FLISP units. There will also be 1,838 open markets units, giving a total of 3,602 units. This is one of the examples, Deputy Speaker, that the provincial government, together with the City of Cape Town and a number of other municipalities across the province, are doing in terms of addressing the spatial injustice, which is, as I alluded to, this is a very long history, which all of us are grappling with. And I think the interventions that are made thus far are proving that we are on the right direction. If you look at the Somerset precinct, the overall Somerset Hospital precinct is approved, is defined by 3 sites: the former Helen Bowden Nurses Home precinct, the Somerset Hospital precinct, and the Old City Hospital precinct. Residential land use is the largest component of the land use mix in the Somerset precinct. And as you are aware, Deputy Speaker, and a number of members in this House, that with the support of some of the members in this House, that particular precinct was now invaded by people, and we are engaging them with an intention of making sure that we are developing that area for the benefit of many of the people, including some of the people who are residing there currently. The Somerset development would enable over 1,300 households to live close to work, shopping, entertainment, and other urban services, including a minimum of 20% affordable housing in an area that is now well served by public transport. The third intervention by this government is Founders Garden, which is situated in Rogabai in the CBD of Cape Town, south of Elevated Freeway, Nelson Mandela Boulevard. This site has historical and urban design significance. Rezoning approval obtained from the City of Cape Town was for residential allocation of a minimum of 29,000 square meters, including social housing. Deputy Speaker, it is understandable that the spotlight of spatial transformation has in recent years fallen increasingly on the CBD in Cape Town. The need is real, and we acknowledge that. Opportunities are limited, and various organizations have driven an intensive campaign, often advocating actions which have led to the unlawful occupation of properties. But that is a topic for another day, Deputy Speaker. My department has not, however, limited its efforts at addressing spatial transformation to only the CBD of Cape Town. We have made available to Minister Simmers And even prior making available some properties to Minister Simmers, a number of interventions were made in a number of towns outside Cape Town, where integrated housing development were implemented and executed, benefiting thousands of people in those towns.
Minister, can you finish off?
We have also made available a number of sites to Minister Simmers so that we can continue with this work in areas like Woodstock and a number of areas surrounding Cape Town and in the city centers of various towns.
Your time is
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I recognize the Honourable Marin.
Deputy Speaker, thanks very much. Speaker, every citizen must think afresh about how all should be part of every aspect of the economy. This is also true about land ownership and a place to stay. All people around the globe think and knew about our massive challenges since COVID-19 brought the whole economy to a standstill, and as masses sought shelter from this virus. As the world and economy wake up to a new dawn, so too must we open up ownership and opportunities. Here in this province, we will soon see a fresh transformation in equitable redistribution, also of land to people. This should include the party spatial planning that was part of the social engineering and manipulation to suit white supremacy plans and white living zones of special segregation. The apartheid spatial scars today are still too visible, and especially in rural areas. People who are kept separate by a river, a road, a railway line, dam, or wall are seen everywhere. Speaker, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Carry on.
Sure. When settlers came to the Cape, they traveled in their ships loaded with equipment and slaves. None of them brought land here. They used the land that was here to advance their plans and to pile up wealth. Those that were marginalized by the hateful apartheid colonialism, together with racism and gentrification, all must work for a new order and integration. The old socio-economic system, by people who thought they could forever be superior from behind their guns, must be changed. The outdated legacy of this apartheid virus needs to be conquered. Within our laws and tribunals, land must be availed, unproductive land redistributed, identified land allocated, and the long-term plan funded to bring a new planning system. Food security and the agricultural economy must be maintained. But the back of the cruel apartheid spatial planning dragon must be broken once and for all. Integration cannot be avoided anymore. Municipalities have a bigger role to play in the process to speed up and unite people to find solutions. Security of tenant must be taken seriously with homelessness. Poor people and social housing are priorities. As this level of evil apartheid virus damage must be reversed. The new approach lacks in the conservative old boys club backrooms of the DA, whose members masquerade as liberals. They seek privilege over for a few over decades, and even less payment for workers than the national determined minimum wage. Things got worse in the days since leaders like different thinking, Musa Maimane, were weeded out and left on the wayside by those people protecting the very white interests of the DA money suppliers. The present provincial regime of the DA has yet to change its approach. As we have not seen any movement from or strong desire to change under Western Cape Premier Ellen Windy's tenure thus far, the DA can show its mettle and unconditionally join the ANC's call for a moratorium on the sale of all land, not leasing for long periods of vacant land for a pittance, and not allowing perpetuate apartheid spatial planning that divides people. The DA leaders have a moral obligation to protect and support the poor, not to advance the interests of big businesses, those who benefited in the past or invested with deep pockets. Deputy Speaker, let me end off by quoting one of the ANC presidents, John Langali Bilele Dube, when he addressed an ANC conference in the early 1950s. He said, and I quote, "Land is everything. Without land, we are nothing. On land, we plant food. On land, we build houses. On land, we practice our cultures and we pray. Any race, doesn't matter what color or creed, are doomed to fail without land. Therefore, the restriction of land ownership based on race shall be ended. Close quote. Thanks, Speaker.
Thank you. I recognize the Honourable Minister Simmers.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, Honourable Premier, Honourable Cabinet members, and Honourable members of the House. Speaker or Deputy Speaker, on social media platforms, words and phrases are being compared with or referred to as a person. If you Google the word hypocrite, therefore, or open your dictionary right now, you will see a picture of the sponsor of today's debate next to this word. When someone is in a position where they have an opportunity to make a difference and do not use it optimally, yet seek to criticize others, we should all be alarmed. Perhaps some might feel this is harsh. As Honourable Member Brett Herron, while he was still the Maker Member of Transport and Human Settlements in the city of Cape Town, spoke about potential social housing projects at the Salt River Market and in Pine Road, Woodstock. Where are these noteworthy projects he keeps on talking about, one should ask. It was during Member Herron's tenure in the 2017-18 financial year, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the city of Cape Town had to return 166 million rand of its urban settlement development grant to the National Department of Human Settlements. This amount would have produced approximately 1,038 housing opportunities. Waar is die verskil dan nou vragies? Undoubtedly, an opportunity missed by this member in his previous life as a councillor to make a difference in the lives of more than 1,000 people in the city of Cape Town. When addressing spatial injustice, you have to transform spaces and places. Have we managed to achieve this as a province? Not fully yet. Have we made strides on our path to transform our spaces and places? This is an emphatic yes. Deputy Speaker, addressing the apartheid spatial planning legacy is a provincial imperative, and as such, well-located affordable housing has been designated as a priority, as our aim is to remarkably improve the lives of the most deserving in our communities, while also seeking to address the injustices of the past. These are inclusive of the elderly, disabled, backyard dwellers, and those longest on the waiting list, where we are ensuring that our people are moved into an improved area and dwelling, which they call home. Member Herron is fully aware of this provincial government's impeccable record of delivery. But not only that, through this delivery, we've improved and transformed the lives of thousands of people across this province. Had the member, while in the city, spent the USDG for the 2017-18 cycle, it could have been a different picture that we are talking about today. Deputy Speaker, the sponsor of today's debate should familiarize himself with my department's 2020 and 2025 strategic document, particularly since he's part of the Standing Committee of Human Settlements. By doing so, you'll note how spatial transformation is pertinently expressed in this document for the entire province. I'd also advise that this member starts visiting the various projects throughout the province to obtain a full and clear understanding of what is happening and not just focus on Province Village itself. It's not always advisable to only write no good newsletters that is based on fake news. One of the ways we are addressing spatial transformation is through the social housing program, which we have throughout the Western Cape. So 'n plek van 'n kwak self verkoper is, ondervoorsitter, spreek ons die ware nood van ons mense aan, anders as die borg van vandag se debat. In the metro, we have the Glen Haven project in Bellville, Regent Villas in Mitchells Plain, and phase 3 of the Boetestock social housing projects, where together over 900 individuals will benefit between now and 2021. This year, we're also looking forward to the commencement of the Pine Road social housing project in Woodstock. Others have blown hot air about this, but this we're doing right now. Furthermore, the 1,055 units, which are intended to be developed around Goodwood Station, will also occur in due course. Social rental housing is, however, not limited to the metro, as 11 leader town municipalities are working toward establishing smart partnerships with social housing institutions across our province. The province has secured 500,000 rand from our social housing partner SHRA to help the Stellenbosch municipality investigate the development potential within specific municipal precincts. This is making steady progress. We also have the Dal Yusufat social housing project in Paarl, which is in the planning phase. Approximately 400 units are expected, and last Friday, Council approved its SHI company, which will assist them with this. Deputy Speaker, we are a forward-thinking and planning province and department, and with this said, approximately 82 further potential projects are being explored and packaged over the next 10 years. This entails approximately 22,000 social housing unit opportunities. Some of these potential future initiatives include the Salt River Market Development, which is proposing 216 social housing units with 448 market-related units. If you make your way to Marshall Bay, you will also find the Mount View development, where in excess of 300 units, social housing units will be constructed in due course as part of a bigger project site plan, Deputy Speaker. In conclusion, Deputy Speaker, COVID-19 is teaching us that it cannot be business as usual. Policy, budgetary realignments, and bylaw amendments, particularly at national and local government levels, are urgently required if we are going to effectively and speedily address the needs of our people and to address the injustices of the past. In conclusion, as a provincial department, but also as a DA-led provincial government, we remain committed, as we have done over the past decade, to accelerating human settlements delivery where it's needed the most, while promoting social inclusion throughout the development of these integrated projects, ensuring they are resilient, safe, and sustainable, but above all, in an open opportunity society for all our deserving people in the Western Cape. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I recognise Honourable Klego. Not here. Okay, I will move on to Honourable Bartman.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Honourable Deputy Speaker, fellow South Africans. Today in history, in 1932, after flying for 17 hours from Newfoundland, Amelia Earhart landed near Londonderry, Northern Ireland, becoming the first woman to undertake a transatlantic solo flight. Amelia Earhart inspired us to soar. There was no term spatial justice in 1932, but Amelia Earhart defied the rules and took up her space in our history books. She famously said, quote, "Never interrupt someone doing something you said couldn't be done," quote closed. Deputy Speaker, the quarterly labour force survey released in February this year by Stats SA revealed that the Western Cape's official and expanded unemployment rates in the final quarter of 2019 dropped to 20.9% and to 24.1% respectively compared to the previous quarter. In the last quarter of 2019, the Western Cape created 24,000 more jobs and remained the province in South Africa with the lowest unemployment rate. We need to recognize injustices of the past and actively address those challenges through opportunities to achieve a more just and equitable society. Further, the Western Cape Gini coefficient decreased from 0.56 in 2009 to 0.52 in 2015, lower than Gauteng at 0.55 and lower than KwaZulu-Natal at 0.61, our economic counterparts, as published by Stats SA in the Inequality Trends Report of November 2019. The Gini coefficient is the most commonly used measure of inequality. In the 2018 Global Financial Centres Index, Cape Town was named the top financial centre in sub-Saharan Africa, overtaking Johannesburg. This is because Cape Town in the Western Cape makes good business sense for all. The Western Cape consistently comes out as South Africa's top province for good governance according to the Presidency's Performance Management Assessment Tool. Within the first 10 years of a DA-governed Western Cape, a total of 508,000 jobs were created, 1 billion rand in economic savings were generated through our red tape reduction and ease of doing business strategies, and 70% of South Africa's renewable energy manufacturing now take place in the Western Cape. Deputy Speaker, there's much to be still done. More jobs to be created, more girl children to educate. But the Western Cape province is an example of doing something most people said could not be done. We have already built the runway. We now need to remain focused on ensuring everyone receives an opportunity to board the plane to a brighter future. Amelia Earhart would say, quote, "Some of us have great runways already built for us. If you have one, take off. But if you don't have one, realize it is your responsibility to grab a shovel, build one for yourself, for those who will follow after you." Quote close. Deputy Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I now recognise the Honourable Christian.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, as a young child born in and bred in a poor township called Bonteheuwel, this topic is very close to my heart. But I was born there because my mother was removed from Wilkinson Street, Newlands, through the Group Areas Act. So being a chef in Rondebosch, my mother previously walked to work and now thrown and chucked into Bonteheuwel, had to commute from and to work. Because of her long hours, we hardly saw her. As Deputy Speaker, as apartheid moved people from their workplace, far from the workplace, and in the outskirts of where nobody wanted, they created a Mitchell's Plain. They created first a Bonteheuwel, then a Manenberg, and then a Mitchell's Plain. So people were put far away from their work, and we know moving people far away from the work, from the workplace, put a tremendous strain on the family, with parents leaving the home early in the morning and arriving back late at night. Deputy Speaker, in many families, this is still the case. In many families, this is still the norm. And Deputy Speaker, although I heard what Minister Summers are saying, and collectively, national, provincial, and local government must do more. Many of our vulnerable communities are still constrained by the legacy of economic disempowerment. And after living many, many years in a democratic society, this legacy is still prevalent in our townships. When you walk the streets in the Manenbergs and Bonteheuwels and Heidevelds, young people early in the morning is still roaming the streets, and this is testament that we still got a long way to go. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. I recognise the Honourable van der Westhuizen.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, the majority of members of this House would have loved to see much higher levels of integration in our neighbourhoods. It is no secret that integration of our neighbourhoods will feed mutual understanding and nation building. Yet we see very little integration. Why? Spatial injustices have a lot to do with economic injustices. I want to say again, spatial injustices have a lot to do with economic injustices. We will lack racial integration for as long as these injustices are not corrected, made evident by Stats SA showing vast differences in the average incomes of races. Why do we still have these vast differences despite the government actively, and as we've recently seen, even aggressively pursuing racial redress? The biggest contributor to the widening gap in incomes is the lack of economic growth caused by incoherent economic policies. The ANC government, through its high-handed manipulation of the economy, has actually widened the inequality gap in South Africa over the past years. This despite our constitution demanding of government to ensure greater equality among South Africans. Some believe that affirmative action should also include the uneven subsidization of land. They believe that well-placed and valuable pieces of land should be allocated for free or at values far below market prices. These developments are marked by their high levels of contestation, leaving questions on how to become a beneficiary. And because there's a limit to the number of people that can be accommodated in this way, it often causes a lot of tension within communities. The high monthly expenses of expensive properties, such as rates, linked to the possibility to realize a quick and handy profit, often persuades, and I can almost say forces, poor people to sell their properties. While they then make a nice profit, It's a once-off shot in the arm. The choice is therefore A, let a few individuals enjoy vast benefits, which are often short-lived, or B, to unlock the value of the properties by selling them from the onset at actual market value to developers, and then use the considerable proceeds to benefit and uplift many people by the provision of affordable housing opportunities. Some political parties, such as the ANC, are known for their propensity to enrich chosen individuals with public money. The Democratic Alliance, on the other hand, believe that public money should be used to improve the lives of as many beneficiaries as possible. And that summarizes the differences between the DA and some of our other political parties when it comes to the allocation of land. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I recognize the Honourable Brinkhuis. Honourable Brinkhuis, are you there? I move over to Honourable Maseko.
Thank you very much,
The
Deputy
list shows
Speaker.
I'm supposed to be next. Why do you change the list order?
Apologies. Just 1 minute, Honourable Maseko.
Okay.
On a point of order, are you asking me on a point of order, Honourable Member Murray? I have a list.
Point of order, Chair, that I've received a list which shows me as speaking after Mr. Van der Westhuizen. Now, why is that changed?
My apologies, it probably hasn't changed. It's according to my list. It might be have changed, and I will take note from the table staff. And if we can just ask Member Maseko to wait, I will go on to Honourable Member Murray.
Okay, I don't mind to wait, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Over to you, Honourable Murray.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Spatial justice involves, and I quote, fair and equitable distribution of socially valued resources and opportunities to use them. This is a quote by Edward Soja, 2009, a French academic. I argue, therefore, that spatial injustices, whilst already dealt a death blow and a heavy blow through the scrapping of the Group Areas Act and the constitutional right to freedom of movement and association. What is left is to create economic opportunities for a new, restless, emerging black and colored middle class capable of sustaining themselves economically to access existing resources and facilities currently in more affluent areas. The Western Cape has felt the brunt of failed socio-economic policies and ideologies that has created the disastrous notion of entitlement with little or no effort to become self-sustainable. We have become a nanny state with deeply flawed economic policies. Spatial justice should not be equated with forced social integration, land grabs, and social engineering. We need new approaches if we are to win the battle against poverty and the lack of access to those facilities which could improve the quality life of the indigent. Then we need a totally new approach. Speaker, crime, gangsterism, drug trafficking, prostitution, and homelessness are products of poor education, moral decay, psychiatric disturbances, and not one of spatial planning alone. We must protect and motivate hard-working, law-abiding, self-sufficient people that contribute towards the economy and not punish them further to satisfy the unsatiable needs of those to whom social handouts has become a lifestyle. I therefore propose a re-look at my proposal of 2000 when I, as city mayor of the city of Cape Town,
thank you. Your time is
up. For a new city of 1 million people on our west coast to be built so that spatial justice can be given to those who don't have it.
You're way over time. Thank you very much. I then recognize the Honourable Maseko.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, spatial planning is about methods and approaches used by, in this case, government to influence the distribution of people and activities in spaces of various scales. The Western Cape is one such example of what a society can achieve when its government prioritizes workable, bold, and pragmatic plans to enrich the lives of its citizens. It therefore comes as no surprise that the Western Cape is constantly brought under scrutiny where contentious and complex issues are concerned. This, Deputy Speaker, should be worn as a badge of honor in a country where government has long ceased to account for its actions and, without any fail, plunder its citizens at every opportunity in sight. The Western Cape simply outperforms every other province in meeting our constitutional obligations. This is a bitter pill the opposition parties in this House has no choice but to swallow. Deputy Speaker, DA-led Western Cape is the only province with solid track record in delivering human settlements to our most vulnerable. The Provincial Department of Human Settlements, under the leadership of Minister Simas, achieved a number of groundbreaking projects within a year of taking office. Despite the increase in housing demand, the province has prioritized backyard dwellers by including their participation in the province's Housing Opportunity Priority Group. This means that when the department undertakes a greenfield project, these individuals will be prioritized. This year alone, City of Cape Town has allocated approximately 2.1 billion for formal housing, 4 billion for informal settlements and backyard dwellers, to name a few. This, Deputy Speaker, are just a few examples of what this government has achieved thus far after it once again received a clear mandate from the people of Western Cape in May last year. The truth of the matter is that this government has consistently demonstrated our commitment to improving the lives of those affected by spatial injustice and ensuring that we promote social inclusion through the development of integrated, safe, and sustainable human settlements. The ANC at some point needs to put their pride in their pocket and learn from the Western Cape if they are serious about giving dignity to all South Africans who do not have the privilege of living under a capable government. Hashtag let's get to work means less talk and more actions. This is precisely what we are doing, and no amount of cheap politicking will deter us from establishing quality and inclusionary housing for those who need it the most. Democratic Alliance is determined on building a more inclusive, integrated, and vibrant province that addresses the legacies of our past in rectifying existing imbalances. I thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you very much. I recognize the Honourable Dartmoor.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, and thank you very much to Member Heron for raising this debate. I think when MEC Madikizela talks about the fact that other provinces have not made progress, he forgets Joburg, he forgets Tshwane, and other cities, including PE, which have actually made major progress in terms of building various options in the inner city, including rent to buy. But we want to give notice that we have reached a point where we are no longer going to wait for a provincial government and a democratic alliance that actually has no political will to really move towards integrated human settlements, which will actually reverse apartheid spatial planning. And that is why we as the opposition will go ahead to reach agreements with farmers, with landowners, with property developers and others in line with the policy which we are busy pursuing, which will clarify in what circumstances expropriation without compensation should happen, and a host of other measures. So we are not going to wait for MEC Madikizela. We are not going to wait for the Premier. We are going to talk to the people of the Western Cape who are willing and who realize that we have to move on this path. We will do this not only as the opposition, but in fact, as a government in waiting, because the people of this Western Cape have lost faith in this particular province. And for instance, we know very clearly in regard to what MEC Simmers have said, when he begins to attack Member Heron and says that the provincial government has got a good track record. The reality is that it was the provincial Department of Human Settlements, while MEC Madigizela was the MEC, that formally pushed a social housing proposal for Tafelberg. But it was this previous provincial government led by Premier Zille, who is now the de facto leader of the DA, together with the Institute of Race Relations, that actually pushed back on a proposal that the officials had made. We welcome Member Christians in regard to talking about solutions being needed at all spheres of government and for sharing his own painful experience with us. But Speaker, we need to understand that this coronavirus period that we are in is not the first emergency that the world is dealing with. At the time of the economic crisis referred to by the Cubans as the special period, which came as a result of the fall of the Soviet Union in '89, bringing adverse economic turmoil as resources dwindled, the citizens of Havana took matters into their own hands. And this is an example in other countries in a post-war situation. They started, in this instance, a grow your own revolution. It was during this period that urban farms and allotments sprang up across the city, and these remains sustainable sources of food to this day, Deputy Speaker. As we are battling with the outbreak of corona, which has exposed many challenges in our society, including the apartheid spatial legacy, which has meant the majority of cases are found in working class communities, cases of corona, as well as food security issues that come as a result of job losses. As the ANC, we wish to make a call today to all municipalities to make available pockets of land in their jurisdiction for the use of urban farmers and allotments, the way the British did after the war, for the reckless opening of the economy. The DA should actively be positive and support the campaign proposed by us as the African National Congress in this legislature. The continued calls to end the lockdown are clear that the DA does not have the interest of the poor at heart. Many of the pathologies we face in the province can be traced back to the brutal legacy of colonial dispossession and the evil system of apartheid spatial planning. In fact, we remember that it was the Oudtshoorn municipality, the southern, actually celebrated and prided themselves in being the first municipality to enforce group areas. The ANC remains committed to building a national democratic society which would address the historical injustices via the redistribution and, of course, the restitution of land and other resources, employment equity, and the eradication of apartheid productive relations. The stumbling block we all know is looking us in the face, and that is the DA government, committed to its own backward conservative policies, which actually increasingly look like those of the far right emerging across the globe. What is clear is that the glib articulation of an open, equal opportunity society does not provide any answers. They talk unity, but they ignore the demon of racism, as if the word racism is a swear word, never to be mentioned in the same breath as an equal opportunity society. The mantra of 13 years ago, the task spoon seat, ideally suited for social housing. The cynical sale of well-located land by the DA continues, and in fact has provided an environment in which gentrification takes hold in communities like Woodstock and Observatory. The President, in his State of the Nation address in 2019, said, in the immediate term, government will accelerate efforts to identify and release public land that is suitable to smart urban farming. They hate to say this is the first step in our resolve to expropriate land without compensation, as resolved by the 54% negatively on environment, and that each municipality during this COVID period, as we said earlier, identifies allotments for growing of food. That can be done immediately. And also the completion of a transparent and accessible land audit of all national, provincial, municipal, as well as state-owned enterprises properties, not just for well-located human settlements, but also land and buildings, so that we can also identify well-located private land. And I would in this instance refer to a place that the Speaker knows well, the area in Hermanus Paradise Park, which clearly needs to be expropriated to actually make sure that we provide for housing of the poor and working class in that area. Central to all of this must be concrete steps to integrate Cape Town and our rural towns by actually taking concrete steps. We appeal to the people of the Western Cape, realize that the DA is not going to do this. Support the ANC and progressive organizations. We've even heard the call from the Freedom Front Plus today, unequivocally saying that so-called colored and black people have been denied land. But land is about wealth. Land is about building the security on which to build a family, to build a community, and to build a society. So we are going ahead. We are not going to wait. We are going to give leadership to this province. We'll be sitting with Agri-Western Cape. We'll be sitting with property developers. We'll be sitting with unions. We'll be sitting with landless communities. And we are convinced that as our president has called for social compacts, it is possible for us to develop a social compact. And in fact, what is going to happen is that the DA is going to be a distant memory, a bad memory in the minds of people, because in fact, they are all out in terms of preserving the legacy of apartheid spatial planning, upholding privileges. It's very clear to us that the DA has blocked and stopped the experiment to broaden their base and are now simply looking at narrow interests. We will never allow this, and we put on record, we are going to change this province with or without you.
Thank you. I recognize the Honourable Minister Bell.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, Speaker, I wonder if the Honourable Member Herron is aware this is the Provincial Parliament and not the National Assembly. Honourable Herron and his ANC Good Coalition government runs the country. Your coalition government is in charge. So I want to ask you, sir, when will your coalition government provide us with adequate land and budget to build houses for the poor in the inner city and towns in the Western Cape? For the past 25 years, the ANC has been the major stumbling block to reducing spatial inequalities in this province and in this country. And now the Good Party has joined them in a government of national unity. Allow me to repeat an example that really matters. District 6. Honourable Herron is speaking after me, and I want to ask him to provide this House with a guarantee that he will lobby his national coalition partners to release District 6 land to the City of Cape Town speedily, so that we can finally start moving people back to where they belong. As Member Herron is well aware, District 6 has been under the control of national government since 1994. You remain silent about it, Member Herron. Why? Is it because you don't want to jeopardize your chance of becoming a deputy minister in the ANC cabinet? We will put 60,000 people back in District 6. Give us the money and the land and we will do it. Can you put your money where your mouth is, or are all bark and no action? Deputy Speaker, we shouldn't be surprised that so very little has been done on a national level to reduce spatial inequalities in South Africa. The facts are simple. The ANC and its coalition partners do not care about spatial inequalities. They also do not care about the poor. 6,000 schools in this country, Honourable Dakbo, 6,000 schools still today under ANC control is using bucket toilets. None in the Western Cape. None so blind as they who choose not to see. None so blind. I will highlight another example. The fact that the ANC Good Coalition government allows all SASSA offices to close down in one day of ongoing COVID lockdown. Those partners then demanded that poor and vulnerable communities must go online and register for help during the ongoing 7-week and counting lockdown period. The result is an ongoing humanitarian crisis that is rapidly escalating. What a disgrace, and that disgrace is on the ANC and good government, and you say you're a government in waiting. Please save our people. Honourable Deputy Speaker, the ANC Good Party Alliance have no idea that what things are like on the ground. They are totally out of touch with the people. The closest they get to communities is on Facebook and Twitter. Their leaders breaking lockdown regulations, going to fancy dinners where they post their wine drinking on social media, while vulnerable people lose their jobs and struggle to find good food to eat. We shouldn't be surprised. Don't forget that the ANC sold out long ago to enrich themselves. Remember the Gupta family? It has been estimated that the Guptas may have looted up to 100 billion from this country. 100 billion rand, Honorable Deputy Speaker. We could have built 625,000 houses for our poor and vulnerable communities. But Honorable Duckmore won't touch on that. How many times have you heard the Good Party Secretary General, Honorable Herron, demand that anyone of the many implicated national cabinet members step down for their alleged links to corruption? What has happened to morals and integrity? Honorable Speaker, it would be remiss of me not to remind members that the Honourable Member Herron was in fact the Mako member for Transport and Public Works in the City of Cape Town when his friend and leader was the mayor. Those are the two most powerful positions in the City of Cape Town. What did they do to address spatial inequalities during their time? Nothing. Nothing, Honourable Deputy Speaker, but today they want to be clever. Allow me to further remind you what happened in September 2018, only 2 years ago, when Honourable Herron's friend resigned as the mayor of Cape Town, and Member Herron was a proud member of the DA and applied for the mayor. When he didn't get his way, like a spoiled child, he threw his toys out of his 800,000 rand Mustang and resigned from the DA. Suddenly, all of us is racist. What a hypocrite. Honourable Deputy Speaker, Honourable Herron, the most senior member of the city in charge of driving low-cost housing in the city centre, then slammed the city for the slow provision of low-cost housing. What a joke. You failed the people. You failed the people of the City of Cape Town, no one else. Honourable Deputy Speaker, this province is working day and night to address the legacies of apartheid. We are fully aware of the triple challenges of poverty.
Point of order, Chair.
Still 1 minute.
Deputy Speaker.
Yes,
Yes,
who am I speaking to on a point of order? What's your point of order?
Honourable Nkondlo. Honourable Nkondlo.
What's your point of order?
Deputy Speaker, is it parliamentary because it's the second time it was MEC Simas and now it's MEC Bredel to be calling another honourable member hypocrite, and the debate just continues and you are not calling this out of order? Is it parliamentary to use such a language in the House?
Honourable member, we are not going to stifle free speech. Hypocrite is not a derogatory word at all, and I will accept to let it go under the circumstances. We are in the House, and the freedom of speech has to be at least some free speech rather than being limited to anything more. I mean, we already have limitations at this point during COVID-19. Let us allow some free speech. I will move.
So hypocrite is free speech.
Yes.
Honourable member, I've made the ruling. I will continue with the minister.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. This province is working day and night to address the legacies of apartheid. We are fully aware of the triple challenge of poverty, inequality, and unemployment, and therefore we do our utmost best.
Honourable Minister, what's your point of order, Honourable Member Syed?
Deputy Speaker, I warned earlier last year and even this year, and I want to rise on this point of order that the MEC is speaking directly to the Honourable Member here, and you should address through yourself as a Deputy Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Syed. Minister, if you could address me, you may proceed.
I'm sure it's free speech.
On the point of order, Speaker. On the point of order, Speaker.
Yes.
They're trying to waste time. This is the problem.
Yes,
Honourable Minister.
On the point of order, Speaker.
Yes, 1 minute. Yes. I recognize you. Yes. What's your point of order?
Honourable Speaker, so that means that in future, even if I refer to you as a hypocrite, that will be allowed as free speech. As free speech.
This is the House, Honourable Member. Honourable Member, this is the House.
It's not a point of order.
On a point
Please
of
do
order.
not speak when I'm speaking to. Member, can I answer you? That is my ruling. I'm not going to downplay freedom to speak here. I don't believe hypocrite is a derogatory word that needs to be outlawed in this parliament. I have now made a ruling and my ruling stands. I will move over to the minister.
Speaker is a hypocrite.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
No, but
not your house.
Honourable Speaker,
Now, order, please.
On a point of order.
Order.
Yes, point of order.
Honourable
Oh, it's
Deputy
allowed.
Honourable Deputy Chief Whip.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Speaker, I rise on Rule 62, subsection 1, that no member may reflect on the honour or competence of the holder of an office whose removal from such office is dependent on the decision of the House. And what the African National Congress has just done is that they have reflected on your honour as the presiding officer. I ask you to please rule that they withdraw their unparliamentary statements.
Honourable member who made the who called me a hypocrite, will you be prepared to withdraw?
Can I address you, Speaker?
First, I would like the person who said it to withdraw.
I would like to address you before that, Speaker.
Honourable Lecker, you can speak. Honourable Lecker, I'm listening.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I also have a point of order to raise.
What's your point of order, Chief Whip?
My point of order is on Rule 66(5), which states that a member who is aggrieved by a ruling may not challenge a ruling in the House.
Speaker?
Thank
Deputy
you.
Speaker, can I address you, Deputy Speaker?
And therefore,
1 minute, Honourable Lecker.
Deputy Speaker,
and therefore I ask,
as and when there's a member on the podium that has been recognized, Deputy Speaker, I'm not sure if you said I must sit down while you're attending to the Chief Whip of the House, because I was still on the floor and you did not say anything. You simply recognized her while I was speaking. That's what
sorry,
you did.
Honourable Lecker, we did not hear you. I will come back to you. I would like to finish with the Chief Whip and I will absolutely give you the time to address your grievance. Yes.
Thank you.
Honourable Chief Whip.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I was rising on a point of order in terms of Rule 66(5), which states that a member who is aggrieved by a ruling may not challenge such in the House. And therefore, I'd like that you call to order that member that is, in fact, in breach of the rules and in terms of that rule. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honourable Chief Whip, over to you, Honourable Lecker.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I rise on a point of order raised by the Deputy Chief Whip, where he actually singled out a point that was part of a full sentence and decided on at that moment that he would then associate that part. And I think it is disingenuous of Member Mitchell to say to the Speaker as to what the ruling must be, because in the first place, he took it out of context and made it a point. So I would like you, Speaker, to revisit the Hansard before you make any decision, because he is deliberately misleading and causing confusion in the House. I thank you.
Okay. Honourable Speaker.
Point of order.
I recognise you, Chief Whip.
On the point
There's
of order.
now a point of order on top of another point of order. You can't put a top of order another one. No, Deputy Speaker.
Order,
Deputy
Order.
Deputy Speaker, what you are doing, you are allowing a point of order on top of another point of order without even ruling.
Muta.
Order, please. Now, can I have one person address me at the time?
Can I address you, Speaker?
I am now recognizing the Chief Whip, as I have chosen to recognize her, and I'm allowing her to speak.
Okay.
Thank you,
I
Madam
will
Deputy
recognize you if your hand is up. So I recognize the Chief Whip, and then I recognize Honourable Sayed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It has been ruled previously that saying deliberately misleading the House is unparliamentary, and the Chief Whip of the Opposition has accused Honourable Mitchell of deliberately misleading the House.
I hear you. Thank you very much. Honourable Sayed, what is your point?
Deputy Speaker, if I heard the Honourable Ulama and Wimby correctly, he was not necessarily saying that you are a hypocrite. He was saying, would it be correct for him to say that you are one? So I think we need to also have a...
I've lost you, Honourable Said. Are you there?
Will assist.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else? Honourable Mackenzie, I see that you have your hand up.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, when the Honourable Mvimbi left, his last words were, as you concluded his speech, he made the example, as Honourable Said rightfully said, his last words as he was departing was, "You a hypocrite," referring to you as the Deputy Speaker, and that is what my colleague, the Deputy Chief Whip, wanted you to rule on and even ask him to withdraw and apologize for that comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Have I recognized everybody who's got their hands up? Honourable Mvimbi, can I recognize you? Okay, your hand's not, all right, your hand's not up.
Honourable Speaker, Honourable Speaker.
1 minute, yes. 1 minute. Honourable Mvimbi, can you start from the beginning? I didn't hear you.
Yes, sorry, my apologies, I was on mute. Honourable Speaker, I never said to you, you are a hypocrite. I made an example that if I say you are a hypocrite, is that allowed in the House? And you said yes. And when I stopped, there was another voice that said you're a hypocrite. It was not me. Honourable Mackenzie must not create stories here. It was not me. I heard that voice that said that you're a hypocrite. It was definitely not me. That was the first point I want to clarify. The second point, Speaker, Honourable Mitchell is constantly misquoting rules of order in the House. It's now the second time. He did that when
I've lost you again, Honourable Mvimbi. There we go.
If I may hear, Honourable Speaker, as I'm speaking, I notice that there is someone who keep on muting me every time I speak. So now, Honourable Speaker, Honourable Mitchell said here, he says, he read Rule 62. He said, no member may reflect on the honor or incompetence of the holder of an office. So far as I can recall, nobody has actually reflected on your honor, Speaker. There is nobody, Deputy Speaker, nobody has even reflected on your competence. So Honourable Mitchell is actually notorious for doing this.
Okay, order. Honourable members, I've made a ruling on the word hypocrite. I'm standing with that ruling, but what I will ask is that the table staff listen to Hansard and we will revert in terms of the word hypocrite or whether I was called hypocrite and revert back in the next sitting. And also in terms of being deliberately misled, I just have to ask the table staff who actually said that. So I will come back to you in the next sitting. I'd like us to conclude with Honourable Minister Bredel's speech, please.
Honourable Deputy Speaker, when it comes to delivery, our record speaks for itself. Ask Stat South Africa, the Auditor General, any institution, when it comes to delivery of basic services and opportunities to the poorest of the poor, on every level, there is no province that can match the Western Cape. We are the only province that have implemented the provincial spatial development framework throughout all our councils. But Deputy Speaker, perhaps I can ask the member Herren to tell the House how the coalition government of the ANC and the Good Party sees justice. Give us an example of where the ANC has done it right. Instead, under the coalition government, more people in South Africa has been arrested for being on the beach than have been arrested for state capture. The Honourable Duckmore can do honour to his word and just arrest one person that was involved in the state capture. Then we will maybe listen to him. The Honourable Speaker, I want to quote, in South Africa, the UN has received reports of police using rubber bullets, tear gas, water bombs and whips to enforce social distance, especially in poor neighborhoods. Honourable Member, is that the type of social and spatial justice you endorse? If not, can you tell this House how you have taken your partners at national government to task to prevent this ongoing brutality against our people? Honourable Deputy Chair, when we look at Honourable Moran, he's quoting a previously ANC president. I wonder what that same president will say today if he looks at the ANC's looting of the state, if he looks at land like in Vrede, the farm in Vrede in the Vrystaat. What has happened there? And I wonder what the Honourable Duckmore will say about that then. But the Honourable Duckmore mentioned sitting. I can promise him after the 24th election, he will also be sitting on the street. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I recognise the Honourable Heron.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, it's quite astounding to me that Ministers Bredell and Madikizela want to know what I did when I was in office. I mean, Ministers Bredell and Madikizela have been in the cabinet for 10 years, and they both held the most crucial portfolios, housing and spatial planning, to achieve spatial justice. And they did nothing in 10 years. In fact, they've now been there 12 years, and they've done absolutely nothing. I was responsible for urban development for 18 months. And within 6 months of that appointment, I began implementing the DA's manifesto about integrating communities and providing affordable housing in good locations. That was the 2016 local government manifesto. I identified 11 sites within 6 months of that appointment. And 3 months thereafter, we had a request for proposals published, calling for proposals. And 4 months thereafter, there were 13 proposals. The reason that I resigned from the DA is because the DA stopped those projects. It is because the DA, I was told in a DA caucus by the Deputy Provincial Chairperson of the DA in the Western Cape, JP Smith, that transformation is a swear word. And that was the last DA caucus I attended. So it is astounding to me that they're saying, what did you do? They know very well that I fought very hard to get 11 projects in Woodstock and Salt River University launched, but they stopped it. And now they're saying, what did you do? They've been there 10 years in the cabinet, earning fat salaries, and they've changed nothing. So absolutely, I'm astounded that that's the response, because if that is the response, then the DA is standing still on the other side of the Rubicon where P.W. Botha left them in 1985. To Minister Simmers, let me say the USDG underspend was in the informal settlements department, and that department was managed by Xanthia Limburg. So that has nothing to do with me. Really, Deputy Speaker, I want to say that we can move forward with spatial justice. We do not have to stay stuck in the past forever. There are alternatives to outdated housing models. The province should not pursue building housing on rubbish dumps in Khayelitsha costing billions of rand. We can stop sentencing people to the fringes and focus on the middle, and not matchbox homes on the edges, but affordable homes integrated with good, expensive homes in new sustainable communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Honourable members.
Point of order, Deputy Speaker.
Yes, Honourable Minister, I recognise you. Honourable Minister Madikizela.
Can I just clarity? Did Member Heron just call the community of Khayelitsha a dump area? I just want to get clarity.
No, we did not.
I would like to clarify.
Madikizela, we shouldn't be clarifying our speeches here. Honourable Minister, Honourable Heron.
The point I made is that the provincial government wants to invest 2 or 3 billion rand in building housing on a dump site in Khayelitsha. And I'm saying that there are better options than that.
Thank you very much. That was unprecedented. I'm now concluding the debate for today and the subject of discussion. Honourable members, thank you for your time, and this concludes the business of the day. The Secretary will now end the meeting and members can exit. Thank you.
Speaker.